It's a picture-perfect day. One that a young Matt Murdock will never forget, the last he will ever see. A helpless old blind man, a careening truck carrying containers of toxic waste. A decision made faster than thought. Gallons of horrid spewing waste, followed by nothing but pain, and then darkness. Changing Matt Murdock's life forever, rendering him blind but with heightened senses to compensate. Son of a boxer, Matt learned early from his father that nothing is impossible so long as you have the courage to be a man without fear. A mantra he'd carry with him long after his father's murder, leading him down a path to becoming Daredevil to strike fear into the hearts of criminals, and to give the people of Hell's Kitchen hope that there's a guardian devil looking after them. So how did Daredevil go from fighting villains to exorcising demons? How has being Daredevil affected Matt's life in the grand scheme of it all? Am I making this video for you, or for myself? Who knows? But you're watching this video, so I'm not going to bore you with any semantics and get right into the whole of Daredevil. Here's the reading order in case you want to take a crack at it yourself, and then maybe you can come back when you're done. It may take you a while, but by the end, if I did my job right, you'll know a good bit about Daredevil's history, so when you're at a party, and one person may happen to make a joke about Daredevil, you can Debbie Ryan the fuck out of your hair, and yell shut up, sit the fuck down.
Let's go, baby!
In the beginning, we're introduced to Matt Murdock, followed by his father, Jack Murdock, where after expressing his dream to be a boxer just like his father, Jack reminds Matt of a promise he made to his mother that he wouldn't let Matt grow up to be an uneducated bum like him, or else he'd get a smack upside the head. Jack would force Matt to stick to the books to become something better than he could ever be, like a doctor, or maybe a lawyer. Forced to never take part in sports or extracurricular activities, Matt became a target for bullying, with kids all around the block referring to him by the nickname Daredevil for his complete lack of fun. Naturally, when you're different and a ginger, you're gonna get singled out a bit and made fun of. Kids are kids after all. But this frustrated Matt more than anything, because he'd like to be like his dad or the kids around him and play sports. Hell, it's not like he was incapable, but he made a promise to his dad to be the man he knew he could be. So to prevent himself at least from being weak, he started to work out. Matt stuck to the books to still make his dad proud, but now he had something to himself. Meanwhile, his father, who'd sadly been long out of his prime by now, with no fights in sight, scores up a gig with the notorious Fixer, taking on battling Jack Murdock under the guise of building him up with fake fights to heighten his popularity, only to make him later take a dive for a huge payout. Now, at first Jack doesn't see this. To him, this is the best day ever, and rushing home to tell Matt the good news, Matt on his way home from school had hurtled toward an old blind man to save him from impending doom. Now, no good deed goes unpunished, as they say, because after the accident, everyone would view what had happened as a tragedy, but Matt turned his disability into something, you might say, daring. The radioactive waste may have rendered Matt blind, but it also heightened his other senses.
My hearing is so acute that I can tell if someone is in a room with me just by hearing the heartbeat. And I never forget an odor once I smell it. I could recognize any girl by her perfume or any man by his hair tonic. Even my fingers have become incredibly sensitive. I can tell how many bullets are in a gun just by the weight of the barrel, while my sense of taste has become so highly developed that I can tell exactly how many grains of salt are on a piece of pretzel. But my most important new ability is in the form of a built-in radar that I seem to have developed. It enables me to walk anywhere safely, without bumping into anything.
With increased strength and agility, Matt would go on to say that being blind has done him more good than he ever had with sight. Yet despite these newfound abilities and the limitless applications they could be used for, Matt would still keep his promise to his father and move out to college to become a lawyer, studying alongside Matt's lifelong best friend, Foggy Nelson. Foggy, you'll come to know to be incredibly unsure of himself, very reserved, afraid to act or to say the wrong thing and possibly appear stupid, which ends up making Foggy's character all the more impactful when he sets his fears aside to stand up and call a spade a spade. He sees the things for how they are and that they can be better, whether in a courtroom or against a demon threatening to kill his best friend. He's an overly optimistic character by nature that, no matter what, tries to see the good in others, who more often than not grounds Matt and reminds him to be the hero he knows he's always been. Foggy also has a pretty awful diet due to eating the most disgusting things ever imagined, but that's neither here nor there. Because for all the good Matt has going for him with Foggy in college, back home his father would be forced by the Fixer to finally take a dive in his boxing match, or he'd have to pay the price with his life. In a bit of a pickle, Jack chooses to do the right thing for his son and bets on himself knowing he can beat Dynamite Davis, so that in winning, not only could Matt be proud of him, but also allow Matt to never worry over money again. In winning the match, it's not long after the show that Jack is slain in an alley on his way home by the Fixer. Taking his dad's death like a punch to the liver, Matt carries out the promise he made to his father, graduating with a degree in law, banding together with his good friend Foggy Nelson to form their own firm, Nelson and Murdoch, hiring on secretary Karen Page. Karen Page, if I could describe her character, is one I found the writers wrote to be a bit all over the place. Arriving in New York City as a naive outsider eager to build a life for herself in the big city. Working as a secretary for Nelson and Murdoch, Karen falls in love with Matt pretty much instantly, trying her damnedest to make Matt see just how in love she is with him at pretty much every turn, only to fall on blind eyes and deaf ears. It's in early Daredevil comics that she's really just relegated to a secretary/love interest and not much else until later, where she's actually a bit more developed, persevering through her drug addiction, learning to accept that Matt will always be Daredevil because it's something he just has to do, and finally choosing to put her life on the line to save others. That in the end, she's a character that doesn't get enough room to shine, sadly, since at her core had painfully real and very believable moments that made her more than just a secretary or a damsel in distress. Now, coming back to Matt accomplishing everything he has set out to do, he can't stand the thought of his father's killer going unpunished. But it's not like he can just go and take him down. Matt made a promise to his father to never solve a problem with his fists. That's when the light bulb goes off. Matt Murdock made the promise, not Daredevil. Stitching together some clothes to make a costume, equipping himself with a collapsible cane for a weapon.
The cane is a sign of weakness. But in that deception alone lies its great strength. The cane must become an extension. The cane must become an appendage. My friend Jack lost his leg when he was 24.
And using the title Daredevil, owning the nickname he hated as a kid. Now, with the tools necessary, he could put a stop to the Fixer as Daredevil and still keep his father's promise. It's only after a tussle with his goons and a sprawling chase that the Fixer's heart gives out before he can confess to anything. But as it turns out, the Fixer was only the guy that put out the word to kill his father. A man by the name of Slade actually pulled the trigger. Getting a confession out of Slade in front of the police, Matt successfully avenges his father and seeks to still use his powers as a force for good. Lawyer by day, crime fighter by night. It's after this issue that Daredevil becomes, for a while in the eyes of everyone, a bit campy. The Fantastic Four seek to be clients under the Nelson and Murdoch firm to handle property damage lawsuits because of the Thing, which fails spectacularly. Every issue ends with Foggy and Karen commenting that, "Oh, Matt's life would be so much better if he had sight. Oh, that poor man. If only he had eyes." Foggy is also relentlessly flirting with Karen, refusing to take a hint when she'll literally say things aloud like, "There's something about him that makes a girl want to take him in her arms and, oh, I'm sorry. Mr. Nelson, I had no right to speak that way. It's just that he seems to need someone to look after him."
Wow, I'd sure like to hear her talk about me in that adoring tone of voice.
Karen is almost comically in love with Matt. She states that she would like nothing more than for him to marry her and sweep her off of her feet, while Foggy, a bit jealous of Matt, really tries anything he can to take her out, like inviting her to dinner several times or commenting on her beauty every second he can, and really just opting to throw all sense of a safe and professional environment out the window. I'm being a little bit curt about this, but I kind of chalk it up to the time that it was made. Yet, moving on, Karen cares about Matt so much that she actually pushes him to have an operation done on his eyes so that he could see again, because he hasn't seen since he was a child, really showing how much she cares for Matt. However, Matt, the guy he is, says no. This obviously confuses Foggy and Karen like you wouldn't believe, because if you were blind, wouldn't you try anything you can to get your sight back? But they could never know how Matt does everything in his life better without sight as a lawyer and as Daredevil. Getting his sight back could compromise that very lifestyle he's become so accustomed to. A lifestyle that ends up intersecting more than he'd like it to. Enter the villainous Leland Owsley, better known as the Owl, former financier and financial investor who, after being exposed for tax evasion and crooked business deals by the IRS, decided to become a crime lord. Only, he just kind of sucks at everything. That's his character. The Owl never learns from his losses, never thinks for himself. All his schemes are thwarted before they can ever leave the drawing board. The Owl wants to be this guy who's loved by everyone, and yet no one knows he even exists. You can kind of learn to feel bad for the Owl if, I don't know, he wasn't a murderous loser. The Owl, I think, has to be the villain that Matt takes the least serious in his entire history. Because under the circumstances of how they first meet, the Owl, faced with criminal accusations head-on, turns to no other firm than Nelson and Murdoch to prove his innocence. Under the guise of Matt Murdoch, aware of the Owl's reputation, would use the information provided to him by the Owl himself to strike at his own operation as Daredevil. Backing the Owl into a corner, he'd resort to kidnapping Karen Page, forcing Daredevil to surrender to the Owl's will. It's here that Matt almost exposes exposes himself as Daredevil by saying Karen's name aloud, making her wonder how the hero Daredevil would even know her. And the longer they spend captive together, she looks at his familiar jawline, his familiar physique, wondering how he could know her name, which he states he's known in his dreams all his life. And listening to that familiar voice, she hears Matt Murdock, but that can't be. Matt Murdock is a defenseless blind man. Only after the Owl's defeat, with Matt Murdock arriving to the scene only seconds later after Daredevil's leave, she thinks to herself,
I must be falling in love with him. Why else would such a shy, quiet, handicapped man remind me of all people, the man called Daredevil?
After the issue, she begins to question herself if Matt could really be Daredevil and if he could be faking his blindness, constantly analyzing his behavior to see if he'll ever break character, choosing to tag along with Matt on a new case for a Zebediah Kilgrave, better known as the Purple Man, in hopes that he'll slip up. To explain why the Purple Man is purple, he was exposed to various unnamed chemicals changing his skin to a purple hue. He was also altered by an accident that ended up giving him the ability to control people's minds at will using his pheromones. Exactly how he ended up in jail? Don't think about it. Yet he ends up using his ability on Karen and his jailers to speed up his release. And through Daredevil's persistence to stop him, the Purple Man commands the people of New York to go crazy and fight each other so that Matt will have no other choice but to save the lives of others and find the Purple Man later. It's as Matt Murdock, he tries to dig up anything to put the Purple Man behind bars. But the funny thing he has to admit is that there aren't really any laws preventing a man from asking for things and then just outright receiving them. So upon finding the Purple Man much later, Daredevil surrenders himself to the Purple Man's will after threatening to command Karen to kill herself. It's while in the Purple Man's clutches that he conveniently explains his power set just loud enough that Daredevil's recording system in his cane can pick it up, later subduing the Purple Man after finding that if the subject has enough willpower, they can negate his command. Providing enough evidence to the authorities to have the Purple Man imprisoned for acts of treason, Karen returns to the firm now more suspicious of Matt than ever before, after spending even more time near Daredevil. But a pin gets placed in this certain plot point for campy adventures with Daredevil donning the all-red suit facing off against silly villains like the Matador, the Eel, the Leapfrog, and Stiltman. I fucking love Stiltman.
Save your breath, mister. We read you. Here's our payroll bag. They don't pay us enough to tackle guys like you. Naturally. No ordinary human can cope with the power of Stiltman.
Stiltman, albeit, is naturally a very silly villain, but his backstory is certainly an interesting tale. Well, at least to me. See, a scientist by the name of Wilbur Day developed a new type of hydraulic lift, and his boss Carl Caxton stole the patent. So he hires the Nelson and Murdoch firm to sue Carl Caxton to get the patent back. The same patent being used by Stiltman, I'll add. The whole time you're meant to believe that Carl Caxton is Stiltman. Daredevil even threatens to expose Stiltman for being Carl Caxton to no avail, given that,
so long as I am the master of my stilts, I am unbeatable. I'm completely invincible.
It's only when Matt and Wilbur arrive to Carl's home unannounced that Wilbur finally decides to show his true colors and reveal that he was Stiltman all along, this piece of shit, attempting to steal more of Carl's inventions since he was the true genius all along. Stiltman, the buffoon he is, ends up accidentally shrinking himself out of existence, later returning from the abyss forever traumatized by the experience but determined to get revenge on Daredevil in the future. Only he kinda dips on this idea entirely to later die and then come back to venture out into space to become the dictator of an alien race. 'Cause, you know, that's just the natural endpoint for a character like Stiltman, I guess. Thereafter, Karen grows incredibly suspicious over Matt yet again, especially when he barely even tries to conceal his identity at a certain point, fighting whoever the fuck these guys are, and quite literally putting on a quote-unquote fake Daredevil costume that the villain known as the Gladiator had made as a commission for Foggy to trick Karen onto a date, for Matt to also subsequently take on the Gladiator in said costume, sparking a vicious rivalry between one another that would sort of be abruptly buried after the Gladiator inevitably decided to later reform, sticking to a life as Melvin Potter, superhero costume designer and personal bodyguard by trade. Only his life doesn't go on to become super glamorous in the process, because sure, Melvin can get married to his therapist, and he can try to be good. Unfortunately, Melvin can be easily manipulated, leading him to more often than not impede on all the good he sets out to do, which sadly ends in his mind splitting into two by Mr. Fear a ways down the road, never to really be seen ever again. The Gladiator is a villain I've grown so fond of over the course of this reading order that by his end, I felt so heartbroken at witnessing all he seemed to achieve just to lose everything. The Gladiator never stood a chance. Now, because Matt has been so careful with his secret identity, somehow we're supposed to believe Foggy and Karen didn't catch on by this point, for fuck's sake. I mean, it takes reading a letter from Spider-Man literally addressing Matt as Daredevil and vowing to keep his secret for Karen and Foggy to come to the conclusion that Matt has been faking his blindness and has been operating as Daredevil this whole time. Backed into a corner, this leads Matt to come up with the most logical reason as to him not being Daredevil. Are you ready? He just says he has a twin brother named Mike Murdock, and they just eat it up. Every now and again, Matt dresses up as Mike Murdock, the cool, the suave, and confident brother that's the complete opposite to Matt, and they're completely gullible to it, never once wondering why Matt and Mike are never in the same room together or anything. Fully on board with this work of fiction by Matt, it goes on for way too long. So Matt kills Mike and reveals to Foggy and Karen that Mike trained a new Daredevil to replace him. This is where Stan Lee's run on Daredevil would come to an end, with Roy Thomas and Jerry Conway taking over. Daredevil comics would still remain campy for another 50 plus issues, with no real change except for having Foggy in a rekindled relationship with his ex, Deborah Harris, and introducing Karen Page's villainous father, the Death's Head, where in a brief stint, Matt had faked his death, and in doing so, Karen went back to her hometown to grieve with her mother over his death. While here, Matt would also be near tracking down the Death's Head, who turned out to be none other than Karen's long-lost and presumed dead father, Paxton Page. Don't worry, he doesn't stick around for long because he sacrifices himself to save his daughter alongside Daredevil. It's also at her father's funeral that Matt decides it's the right time to come forward and admit that he is Daredevil. Karen crying over her father's grave and still mourning over Matt, Daredevil asks Karen to remove his mask.
Karen's by herself at last. Then I don't dare delay any longer.
Even Mother doesn't know I've lost two men that I loved. First Matt, only a few weeks ago, and now...
Karen!
Daredevil? I don't mean to be rude, but I'd like to be alone right now. You only remind me of...
Karen, take off my mask.
It can't be. You're dead. Dead!
No, Karen, I'm not. Matt Murdock is alive. And what is more, my darling, Matt Murdock is Daredevil.
It's in the following issues with Karen now aware that Matt is Daredevil that the two argue constantly about whether or not Matt will quit going out as Daredevil. At first, Karen thinks that she can just live with it, but the worry becomes too much to bear. So she quits being a secretary for Nelson and Murdock and moves to Los Angeles to pursue a career in acting. Matt follows her to Los Angeles where Karen gets a gig as an actress for a soap opera while Matt solves a few murders on set. You know, cause that just happens on movie sets all the time, I guess. But sometimes in life, no matter how hard you may fight for something, sometimes you just gotta face the music and admit to yourself it wasn't meant to be. In this case, they break it off and go their own separate ways towards their own separate worlds. Matt goes back to his world of fighting off crazed villains while Karen watches on all the way in California, as poor Foggy is just over here working Matt's caseload by the dozen. Now there's a reason I haven't really mentioned Matt's life as a lawyer, only because he barely operates as one in the beginning. Either because the writers simply thought it'd be boring, or they lacked enough knowledge to properly form a coherent case that'd make a lick of sense. But hey, what if Daredevil could see?
No way, man. I'm not gonna fight these guys. They look dangerous.
When Matt does operate as a lawyer once in a blue moon, it's either incredibly brief or simply not worth mentioning. Yet there are a few trials I can recall. Like the time Matt represented the Hulk with charges of conspiracy, or representing a client by the name of Maxwell Glenn. Maxwell was forced to commit fraud by the Purple Man, which couldn't be proven without evidence, sending Maxwell to prison and marking the first person Matt ever failed as a lawyer, since the only way he could have proven Maxwell's innocence would be by exposing his own identity to testify. This marked a turning point in Matt's life and would lead him to question whether he was really a hero or not, since he viewed himself not testifying as an act of selfishness. This was one of the more interesting cases leading up to his case with the Black Widow, where Matt had prevented the Black Widow from being framed for murder, which through Matt going out as Daredevil to collect evidence later helped in the trial proving her innocence, where Black Widow is then introduced to Matt as a new love interest, with the two having a lot in common being superheroes and all. Black Widow at first tries desperately to not fall in love with Matt because of a curse she believes in where the ones she loves always get hurt, but Matt is the one to convince her that curse is just pure superstition. Together they last as a couple for a significant time, with Daredevil even following her to live in San Francisco for some time, which I'll add was a fairly uncommon thing for a superhero to leave their home turf, especially over something such as love, where together they'd face against the likes of the Owl, Stiltman, the Scorpion, the Purple Man, Electro, the Gladiator, the Purple Man, the Owl, Stiltman, the Thing, the Owl, the Death Stalker. Hey, a new guy. What's his name? Oh, that's Bullseye made a name for himself in the beginning by establishing his ability to hit any target with any object, starting off by killing a very rich man with a pen for $100,000, raising the attention of Daredevil. Insane, Bullseye at first thought he and Daredevil could be great friends, but following Daredevil's rejection, Bullseye would challenge Daredevil to a battle to the death in a carnival full of hostages. Of course, Bullseye would end up losing through Daredevil's quick thinking and sheer skill, but sadly it'd mark the beginning of a bitter rivalry and an end to this era of Daredevil. In reading most of Daredevil's early comics, I find that they have a certain charm to them. Like, they are full of whimsy and wonder like the crisp fall air. Nothing is dire or depressing. At least not yet. Like, you know how bad it'll get, so looking at these comics for what they are now, they're like those nostalgic memories you'll feel when you smell a certain smell, or how you'll sometimes see a faint memory in the distance on a long car ride. They're the happiest moments a person like Matt Murdock will have, and never again. Because without the bitter, baby, the sweet ain't as sweet. The Deathstalker. A Daredevil villain I've failed to mention until now is a villain that I guess you could say was Daredevil's biggest arch nemesis in the beginning. He was initially the Exterminator and worked for a team called the Unholy Three, comprising of Ape-Man, Catman, and Birdman. They were a pair that attracted a lot of attention from Daredevil, and in a freak accident during one of their escapades, I guess the Exterminator had a gun called the T-Ray gun, which if damaged could send your physical form in an interdimensional realm. Eventually, he learned through spying on Daredevil that his secret identity was Matt Murdock, and hiring the Unholy Three, he'd send them out to kidnap Matt. In succeeding in capturing Matt, he'd kill the Unholy Three and command Matt to change into Daredevil. Engaging in their final fight together, it'd take a dark turn, as an enraged Deathstalker would materialize inside of a tombstone, killing himself. This is the beginning of Frank Miller's run. See, sales for Daredevil in the 70s were pretty much in the dumps. So when Frank Miller came on board to write, he sought to shake things up a bit and get people engaged by taking a shotgun to Daredevil's knees and yelling at him to run up a hill using his hands from here on out. What also contributed to a ton of his much darker story arcs stemmed from Frank Miller getting mugged several times while living in New York, which ironically helped in his process when bringing in several new supporting characters and fleshing the shit out of them, like Ben Urich, reporter for the Daily Bugle with a keen fascination for Daredevil. Over the course of Ben's career, he'd been known to be mostly on autopilot, never taking real risks or publishing monumental stories, till Daredevil came into Ben's life like a storm. From then on, Ben chased down the story of Daredevil throughout the whole of New York. Narrowing his search in Hell's Kitchen, he discovered that there was something about Matt Murdock that connected him to Daredevil, but he couldn't quite put his finger on it. Walking through town, asking questions about Matt to people who either heard or knew about him, he learned of the accident that blinded him, his father's death, and the biggest hint of all, his childhood nickname, Daredevil. Approaching Daredevil in a hospital after a one-on-one fight with the Hulk, Ben confident in the fact that he and Matt are the same person, Daredevil initially tries denying this, but when Ben asks what's on a piece of paper he's holding, Daredevil backed into a corner because he's blind, ultimately confesses. Matt walks Ben through the events that made him into the hero he is today, and begs Ben not to publish the story, to which Ben thinks to himself that by publishing the story he could perhaps make millions, taking his career to new heights. But he also understands that by doing so, he'd destroy Matt's life in the process, choosing to burn the manuscript and keep his identity a secret. That's pretty cool. And hey, Foggy's getting married too. I'm pretty glad to see that nothing bad's come Foggy's way. Wait, shit. I take it back. No! Well, he gets divorced because Deborah found him to be a pretty boring lawyer, and to top that off, the Vulture also just straight up almost convinces Foggy to kill himself. Shit, man, that really bites. You know what else kind of sucks? Running into your ex who's also a global assassin. Attempting to subdue some guy, Matt is hit over the head by a sigh by surprise, and before passing out hears a voice recognizing it to be his first love. Elektra. Knocked out, Matt remembers how quickly he fell in love with Elektra in college and how quickly it fell apart. Falling in love with Elektra the second he laid his radar sense on her, to the point he told her about his abilities almost instantly. The year they spent together afterwards was euphoric. However, through an attempted kidnapping gone wrong in the Nachios family, Elektra's father had been shot and killed during the confusion, after which Elektra left Matt and fled to Europe to later become one of the greatest assassins in the world. No doubt a response to the trauma inflicted upon her, never wanting to be in a position of powerlessness like that ever again. Coming to, Daredevil relentlessly searching the city for Elektra, he finds her held at gunpoint after her job turns sour. It's in working together, Elektra immediately figures out that Daredevil is Matt Murdock and embraces him. Only the moment is fleeting. In the midst of this reunion, Bullseye manages to escape Rikers, where we find out Bullseye has a tumor that's been causing him to become delusional. Seeing Daredevil all over New York, Bullseye never misses. Daredevil just barely puts a stop to Bullseye after slaughtering nearly 100 innocents, and given the chance to let this monster die, there's a moment Matt says he's done all he can, that Bullseye deserves to die, until he turns his head and realizes that by letting this monster die when he had an opportunity to stop it, he'd be no better than Bullseye. Thus, Matt drags Bullseye to safety, after which police are furious with Daredevil for saving an animal like Bullseye. However, Matt says that he's not God. He can't decide who lives and who dies. It goes against everything he believes in. Yet what he says is countered under the pretense that after Bullseye's tumor is removed, he'll just break out and kill someone again, and then whoever dies next, it won't be Bullseye to blame, it'll be Daredevil. And when you think it couldn't get any worse, Daredevil crosses paths with the Kingpin for the first time. The Kingpin is a man of pure evil, of power, and of great intelligence. Like an operatic figure, the Kingpin will take grand steps to display his vile nature, whether outright killing someone for ticking him off, or putting them through a living hell of the Kingpin's creation. What makes Wilson Fisk so dangerous is that he has absolutely no screws loose. The Kingpin never makes a move without thinking 20 steps ahead. He'll deploy men like Bullseye in his criminal empire to achieve his goals, only ever with the guarantee that it'll never come back to bite him. And as a crime lord, he sets himself up within society because of his natural ability to corrupt anything he touches. Officers, judges, politicians. To him, everyone has a price, and he can certainly pay it. Literally everything he does is in secret and remains secret, so he can never be held accountable. From this perspective, so many of Marvel's greatest heroes avoid tangling with him because it's a no-win situation. You may be able to temporarily counter Kingpin as an individual man, as Matt Murdock has struggled to achieve throughout their history, but a superhero vigilante can't save individuals from their own moral failings that make them susceptible to the Kingpin's manipulations. The Kingpin's not a world conqueror who deploys cosmic powers or a serial killer who instills paralyzing fear through bloody mayhem. He deploys ordinary people against the heroes he targets and acts in secret to bend the entire city to his will. The Kingpin is a force of nature, and this is how he roots himself into Daredevil's life forever. Now, by this point, Wilson Fisk has been living a lavish life in Tokyo with his wife Vanessa, no longer the Kingpin, enjoying his freedom so long as he continues to share files on organized crime in New York. It's only when Fisk is offered to clear his name in America if given the rest of the files in court, Vanessa seeks out the Nelson and Murdoch firm to handle the case. Only in seeking them out, Kingpin's old lieutenants in risk of exposure kidnap Vanessa to lure Fisk back to the States. This plan to lure Fisk back to America works, but it doesn't work out quite well in their favor as Fisk begins hunting down the lieutenants one at a time, as it becomes a race against time for the files to secure the safety of either Fisk or the lieutenants. Matt attempts to steal the files for himself to dismantle the entirety of Fisk's criminal empire, only to be beaten to a pulp by Fisk himself and flushed into the city's sewers just before he can get his hands on them. It's in the middle of this that Bullseye is also released after his actions were ruled out as a fluke due to his brain tumor, in which he subsequently hired to kill Fisk by his old lieutenants. In his attempt to assassinate Fisk, it goes horribly wrong after one of Fisk's goons supposedly kills Vanessa, to inspire Fisk to become the Kingpin once again. It's not soon after that the Kingpin disavows the notion of retirement and begins to rebuild his criminal empire. He dispatches his old lieutenants and hires Bullseye to kill Daredevil. However, Bullseye fails miserably, and in that, Kingpin also offers Daredevil to take Bullseye and the files as a gift to take down the Kingpin's competitors while he rebuilds. All the while, Vanessa roams through the gutters of New York, homeless, begging for food and money, ending the arc with Daredevil accepting that the Kingpin won this round, yet the war has just begun. It's here that we're introduced to the Hand, a ninja death cult that mainly seeks power through mystical properties or by calculated assassinations throughout the world. Kingpin hires the Hand to assassinate Matt Murdock, since reports say that wherever Matt is involved, Daredevil is never far behind. That way, Daredevil can stop mucking up the Kingpin's plans. Elektra gets word of this and saves Matt before the Hand could blow up his apartment. However, as a result from the explosion, Matt loses his radar sense, rendering Matt helpless, leading Matt to seek out his old mentor, Stick. Matt's stern sensei, who appeared to Matt soon after his blindness and helped Matt hone his abilities to become a strong warrior to the likes of him. In confiding with Stick about the loss of his radar sense, Stick basically says that sucks, but it was bound to happen at some point. Stick had to develop his own radar sense from the ground up, where Matt pretty much had a free ride because of the radioactive waste thrown into his eyes. To which Stick teaches Matt to develop his own radar sense from the ground up. Going through rigorous trials and conquering his inner demons, Matt shoots several bullseyes and deflects an arrow shot at him by surprise. It's a good thing he gets it back because while he'd been gone, the Kingpin's empire grew, up until Daredevil discovers that Vanessa has been alive the entire time, kept as a slave to the King of the Sewers. Daredevil tells the Kingpin that she's alive and well, and he'll eventually return her, on the grounds that the Kingpin kicks out his newly appointed corrupt mayor from office. The Kingpin reluctantly accepts, but feels as though he needs to retaliate in some way, commanding Elektra to kill Foggy. Only through getting his wife back from the grave, Fisk finds her to have complete amnesia, and not only that, she's utterly horrified by Fisk, subsequently leaving him. Now remember Bullseye? Of course you do. What am I saying? Well, while he was locked up, he really got to think a lot about how he'd make Daredevil suffer specifically. See, Daredevil saved his life and took him down so many times. Everyone in prison thinks he's a has-been. This bothers him a ton, and it gets even worse when the Punisher serving his sentence basically waltzes up to Bullseye and tells him about how the big man's got a new assassin by the name of Elektra, and hopes Bullseye will do something stupid like getting himself killed for starters. Well, he manages to elude the police and finds a guy that knows a thing or two about a thing or two. And the funniest thing begins to happen. Bullseye finds out that Elektra's next target is Foggy from word on the street, and locking himself in a room for a week, just like what I did for this video for 6 months, doing his homework, he starts to look at this picture of Matt Murdock and Daredevil. He thinks it's too silly to be true that they're the same person, but then again, sometimes silly doesn't discount the truth. So Bullseye stalks Matt for a while. Listening to his voice during a trial, he figures that they sound the same, however that's not enough to go on. So he throws something at Matt to see for himself, in which Matt instinctively blocks the strike without even looking. After which Bullseye goes into hiding, he stalks Foggy to eliminate Elektra, and what follows is a brutal battle to the death between both of the world's greatest assassins, ending in Elektra's bloody demise at the doorstep of Matt's brownstone. After which Bullseye tells the Kingpin of Daredevil's secret identity almost immediately after. Bullseye goes through the whole shebang, but the Kingpin doesn't believe him. So Bullseye heads off to prove the Kingpin wrong. Only a vengeful Daredevil would be waiting for him, striking Bullseye with vicious and calculated blows repeatedly throughout Hell's Kitchen until the fight would come to a close with Daredevil holding onto Bullseye over a power line. There's a brilliant moment where Daredevil thinks about saving him. Even Bullseye taunts him, saying he won't let him die. It's just not his style. And for only a moment does Matt hold on before letting go. This act paralyzes Bullseye and traps him within a prison of his own mind, left to hate Daredevil until the day he's put back together and finally able to kill again. It's in the following issue that Matt believes Elektra is still alive. Obviously in denial, Matt starts to think that Elektra had faked her own death. She must have used some ninja training or something, right? But no, that can't be. He heard her heartbeat stop. He heard her take her last breath. He saw her buried. But maybe... right? Matt starts acting crazy, beating up the local crime to a pulp for info on Elektra, showing up to the Kingpin demanding to see Elektra, and finally digs up her grave to find her still dead. As Matt breaks down with Foggy by his side, it's absolutely gut-wrenching. It's while Matt grieves that the Punisher gets word of the Kingpin enlisting kids into his criminal empire that he takes his personal war to the drug trade in Hell's Kitchen. Children drugged, used for gang violence, dying from drug overdoses. The Punisher pursues the dealers in an attempt to wipe out the drug trade, which leads both Daredevil and the Punisher to inevitably butt heads with each other for the first time, on the grounds that Matt believes in the law, in redemption, and that no one has the right to kill another person, while the Punisher believes he has every right to snuff out someone he deems as evil. So they'll never have the chance to drug or use innocent children ever again, or to murder. It's also during the story that a boy is framed for the murder of a drug dealer by one of the pushers. So Matt is both representing the kid and seeking to get a confession out of the pusher that framed him as Daredevil. Only if the Punisher kills the pusher, the child goes to jail for a crime he never committed. It's well within reason to be on the Punisher's side gunning for these drug dealers, but the only con is that he doesn't see beyond this and the ramifications that could affect regular people like you or me in the crossfire. The story's really structured in a way where you understand both angles and really want the guy dead, but in real life, killing isn't the answer, which is so brilliant considering this is in a 21-page comic. With Daredevil stopping the Punisher by the end and saving the boy from life in prison using the law, it's a story that's meant to be bittersweet for Matt as we build up to the resurrection of Elektra. From here, Matt grows a bit manic and stops being a stable lawyer. He barely takes time to be himself and just casually ruins one of his love interest's lives named Heather Glenn, leading her to kill herself because he basically dismantled everything in her life as Daredevil, leaving Matt the only thing for her to care about. So in leaving her, she was left with absolutely nothing left in her life. Yeah, you're gonna find out that Matt isn't all that perfect sometimes. And it's during this mania that Styx shows up to Matt's doorstep with a few of his remaining allies against the hand. And he's like, Matt, we're we're fucking dying, man. Because the Hand sends hundreds of ninjas to attack Matt, Stick, and his disciples in Matt's brownstone. In a battle that seems almost endless, Stick sacrifices his life to save Matt and put an end to the conflict. It's here that Stick's allies tell Matt that the Hand has been resurrecting its strongest warriors and hopes to finally eliminate the resistance Stick forged called the Chaste. And the only warrior left remaining for resurrection is Elektra. Daredevil attempts to exhume Elektra from her grave in hopes to destroy the body before the Hand can nab it, but they kinda just fail miserably. It's through Daredevil reluctantly asking help from the Kingpin to find the Hand before they can resurrect Elektra that they arrive in time to stop the ritual and the Hand. The remaining ally to Stick sacrifices his life to fully resurrect a purified Elektra, now free to live a life free from the Hand and of violence. While Matt is all alone, left to reflect on himself and if being Daredevil is really doing any good for Hell's Kitchen, as he morbidly plays Russian roulette with Bullseye, forming a telekinetic bond. It's by this point that Matt believes he has lost absolutely everything. Little does he know, though, that he still has so much more to lose than he ever thought possible. In the time that Karen Page had left to pursue a career in acting, it didn't exactly pan out the way she hoped it would have, as she'd tragically fall into the wrong crowd, developing an addiction to heroin. Desperate for the next fix and utterly broke, she'd use the only thing left of value. She'd tell her dealer that Matt Murdock is Daredevil. This would come as a shock since Karen loves Matt, but when you're desperate for a hit, you'll do just about anything to get it, even if it means stepping over the ones you love. Word travels from Los Angeles all the way to New York and straight to the Kingpin's lap. The Kingpin finally discovering that Matt and Daredevil are the same person. Oh man, he rips Matt's life to pieces. Because Kingpin starts by getting Matt disbarred, he frames Matt for fraud, he bombs his home, he makes a psycho dress up as Daredevil to kill innocents to discredit his reputation, and finally breaks Matt to the point he's afraid to open a door in fear that Kingpin could be behind it. In this story, you see Matt in a light never seen before. Where he was once this shining pillar of justice for the people of Hell's Kitchen, you now watch as he goes down a road of insanity, despair, and obsession that completely consumes him. His entire world is shredded apart and he's left to tape up whatever little scraps of his life he has left, which isn't much at all. Among this, Ben Urich, in an attempt to expose the Kingpin, is threatened to be killed if he even so much as thinks about doing so. This isn't the first time he's been threatened by the Kingpin with his life, but then again, Matt wasn't presumed dead at the time. Ben always had that safety net to fall on with Matt around his Daredevil, but with Matt out of the picture, there's no one Ben can rely on but himself. If Ben sticks his neck out, he risks losing those that he loves for the sake of justice. And let's be honest, if a lot of us were in Ben's shoes, damn right we'd be scared shitless. This is the fucking Kingpin, man. This frightens Ben to the point that the Kingpin hires goons to work at the Daily Bugle or to live in the same building as Ben to constantly remind him of who's in charge. It's haunting. Over the course of the story, Matt, broken and his psyche shattered, is given shelter by a nun named Maggie, who we're not meant to find out until much later is Matt's mother, who bears witness to how lost and broken her son is, refusing to let Matt lose his way any further by pushing him to find faith in God, to find his spirit once again. And speaking of trying to find their spirit once more, Karen is also trying desperately to travel from Los Angeles to New York, getting involved with this piece of shit that doesn't understand the concept that women aren't property. Ben is too afraid to even utter Matt's full name anymore, and Foggy's actually having the time of his life during this. Everyone is broken down, defeated, afraid. The Kingpin has won, but like a raw, aching nerve, something screams in the back of all of their minds. This can be beaten. This can be overcome. There's no one coming to save them, so they gotta be the ones to get back up and fight back against the Kingpin themselves. Ben Urich goes to the police and confesses to everything. Karen reaches out to Foggy and finds safety, friendship, and compassion, things she had forgotten she always had. And Matt finds his strength. He finds his spirit, and more than anything, he finds his faith again. Fighting tooth and nail to find themselves again, Karen and Matt reunite with each other, and not a word is said. Just the embrace of love and forgiveness. It's in that their relationship is rekindled. Matt goes on to form a somewhat new identity with the woman he loves, and remains Daredevil for the same reason in the beginning. Kingpin is eventually exposed for all of his crimes, including that of sending a lunatic known as Nuke to flatten an entire neighborhood. Thank you, Captain America. In which the Kingpin stays away from Matt's life for quite a while. My takeaway from Born Again is that no matter how hard you get knocked down, how much the odds seem stacked against you, or how much you stand to lose, there's always a way to fight back. It may be brutal, brutal, and it may mean that a whole lot of other nasty things get thrown your way, and you may want to scream and shout and let it all out. Yet what this story tells you plain and simple is that the only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to stand by and do nothing. After reading Frank Miller's run, I really understand why it's so deeply treasured now. Miller does do away with a lot of the campiness of Daredevil right out of the gate, making way for much broader and darker stories to be told. But it's also not all dark. There are genuinely nice and heartfelt stories told in his run as well that don't get enough attention, like Turk stealing Stiltman's suit and trying to be the Kingpin's #1 assassin only to fail hilariously, or Foggy Nelson attempting to gather information from the Kingpin as the infamous persona Guts Nelson, which is formed purely through happenstance, and another story where young Sheldon becomes the Kingpin's arch nemesis. It's canon, guys, I swear. There is so much sincerity and nuance in Miller's run, it's palpable. It feels real at most points for how deeply grounded Miller takes it, and it only gets better when the reins are handed over to none other than Ann Nesenti. Coming off of Miller's brutal run of Daredevil, there's a brief period of normalcy. Matt has to deal with the aftermath of the destruction caused in Hell's Kitchen from the events of Born Again, with civilians either loving Daredevil and idolizing him for taking down Nuke and the Kingpin, or those that hate Daredevil blindly, accusing him of being the one responsible for the destruction caused because of his very existence. Despite Matt's inner turmoil, together again with Karen, they feel born again, like they've been given a second chance at life, as Matt faces against newer, much badder villains like the Bullet, Bushwhacker, and Madcap, all standing in the way of Matt trying to clean up Hell's Kitchen by starting up a free health clinic operating as a non-profit lawyer to help the homeless and the poor. As this run takes Matt to a place for once where he helps his fellow man, steering troubled kids on a good path here, or calling out blood-sucking landlords for their overpriced housing there, you see Matt dedicate his time to show that sometimes to stop crime, it doesn't always require violence to solve it, really making a valiant effort to move on and undo the horrors the Kingpin inflicted upon Hell's Kitchen. While the Kingpin,
I hate Matt more than ever. I want him dead. I hate that bitch.
The Kingpin isn't doing so hot. He's angrier and more hateful than ever because now he wants a really big building made in Hell's Kitchen to cast a shadow over those he calls cockroaches to show how dominant he is. Only because Matt is helping Hell's Kitchen with their businesses, their legal troubles, and their city's welfare, he can't get the big building. So the Kingpin is constantly hating on Matt from afar, waiting for the opportunity to take him out. He gets so desperate, in fact, for any way to make Matt's life miserable that he starts tampering with the people whom Matt helps at his clinic. The Kingpin is at his most petty and pathetic throughout this run. Matt is quite literally living in his head rent-free, going so far as the Kingpin even beginning to pay attention to Karen Page. Kingpin starts to think, well, I don't have Vanessa anymore. Why should Matt get to have Karen? And so an itch lingers in the Kingpin's mind. Killing her would be too easy. The Kingpin has to kill their love. So Typhoid Mary scratches her way onto the scene. Typhoid Mary is one of Daredevil's most wild and, dare I say, iconic villains that doesn't get the spotlight nearly enough as she should. Bearing powers including pyrokinesis and telekinesis while also being severely mentally ill, since within her lies at least 3 distinct alters. Mary at her base characteristics is quiet, a creative. She's timid and more or less a pacifist, where Typhoid is the complete opposite, being more outgoing, destructive, adventurous, lustful, and violent. Throughout the whole course of her life into adulthood, she was raised and always studied in a psychiatric facility, constantly experimented on, poked and prodded. Denying any and all help offered to her, she white-knuckled through it all with her 2 alters to help cope in the form of Mary and Typhoid, finding that for each alter, everything about her changed. Her heartbeat, her smell, even her looks. Over the course of many years, she'd eventually be declared clinically sane, and Mary would go on to become an incredible actress. Only at the height of her career, Mary just disappeared, because Typhoid had taken over to tear down everything Mary built for the excitement, choosing to instead take over and tear apart crime in Hell's Kitchen. You'll see in this run that whenever Mary may have something nice going for herself, Typhoid's voice in the back of her mind will always degrade her to feel better about herself, since Typhoid in essence is incapable of basic decency. Kingpin and his hating ass gets word of Typhoid Mary and her backstory and goes, humana, I'll set her up with Matt and have them fall in love so I can crush his spirit. Telling Typhoid Mary that Matt and Daredevil are the same person, and for $1 million, she must fall in love with him and ultimately destroy his soul. Typhoid accepts the offer and wastes no time using her telekinesis to seduce Matt as Mary. Things between them start off a bit okay. Matt doesn't fall for Mary right away, But Typhoid dispels Matt's resistance by using her pheromones to make Matt become increasingly entranced by her. So the more time they spend together, you can't help but feel slightly uncomfortable, especially when a young blind boy Matt agreed to help adjust to the world is forced to listen to them making out around the corner. Like, come on, man.
It's the telekinesis making me do this. I swear.
It really does get to a disturbing point when he starts dating Mary and Karen at the same time, literally ending one date to walk 20 feet over to Karen. Even the neighborhood finds out and bloody hates him for it, yet the Kingpin bathes in his seething hatred as his plan begins to succeed. Now it's as Daredevil, Matt comes across Typhoid and doesn't recognize her, engaging in fights that more often than not toss him on his ass. I'd really be lying if I didn't mention already how deeply compelling it is when they do cross paths, because Typhoid is making a solid effort to kill Matt, but there's this push and pull within her. Typhoid wants the same love for Matt that she has for Mary. However, Matt despises Typhoid and everything she stands for, so instead she settles for the love she thinks she deserves with the Kingpin, someone she kind of wholeheartedly disgusts. It's certainly difficult for Typhoid Mary. She loves Matt but feels compelled to kill him at the same time. Although it's every time she comes close to killing Matt that Mary takes over begging not to kill him. Mary and her love for Matt dominates the will of Typhoid. So to counter this and end Daredevil, she busts out a bunch of his old villains so they can all jump him to deliver the killing blow. It's on the 4th of July that Matt is the happiest he's been in a long time. He knows he only wants to be with Karen now. He finds a new appreciation for the smaller things, and can't believe how discontent he's been for so long, until he's ambushed by the Bushwhacker, the Bullet, and the Suicide, all giving him the beatings of a lifetime. This is what Matt is after all. He can't be happy. He's violence. He lives by it, and he's gonna die by it. Trying everything he can to survive, it all seems hopeless. His bones broken, body twisted, chest soft. Daredevil is dying, and nothing can stop it from happening. Except Typhoid.
Hello, baby. Hello, love. Come to mama.
So, it was you.
Maybe.
Save me. Please.
Do you love me, baby? Do you want me?
No.
Not even to save your own skin, lover? You'd rather die?
Why? Must you kill me? You don't even know me.
Oh, but I do. I do, my sweetheart. It's so simple. It's beautiful. I have to kill you. I love you.
At first reading this, I really appreciated Nascenti's run and couldn't comprehend why it's never mentioned. Romita Jr. really elevates the story too, I'll add. The way he illustrates this run scratches an itch in my brain. Like, I'm being so serious when I say that I think Romita's best work has been in Daredevil, especially after watching Daredevil go through one hell of a beating to riding horseback into the fiery pits of hell itself. It sounds so bizarre, but just trust me. Basically, a legion of demons invade New York in an event called Inferno. I don't know much about it other than that. Now, that's what I would have said if I didn't decide to go the extra mile and actually read it. Inferno is a big event involving Cyclops' wife, Madeline Pryor, after having been abandoned by Cyclops for the real Jean Grey. Madeline, Jean Grey's clone, understandably goes a bit insane because her mind is a complete schism. She was Jean Grey, memories and all. She was married to Scott Summers and above all else, mother to their child Nathan, until the real Jean Grey came back and basically took everything she had built with Scott while poor Madeline ended up being casted to the wayside, feeling like everything she could ever be was utterly stripped away from her without a choice. And wanting revenge on herself for not being the original, she'd create a pact with demons from Limbo to merge Limbo together with Earth. Because if she couldn't have the life she was made for, she'd be damn sure the other couldn't have it either. Matt is sadly found during the middle of this event, pretty busted up, and on top of everything, while recovering with Karen at his bedside, Mary shows up and confesses to Karen that Matt was cheating on her the whole time, prompting Karen to essentially eventually run out of the story as possessed needles beg her to try some new junk. It's a daunting moment for Karen. She's just had the rug swept out from under her and wants to be as far away from Matt, the person she loves whom she never thought could betray her in such a way, as humanly possible, all the while destroying Matt and leaving him wanting to die now more than ever. But New York needs Daredevil. Demons are devouring innocents among a dozen other obscenities, which plunges Daredevil into the fiery depths of hell. Matt never utters a single word, but his journey is clear. Stop the devil, save the lost souls of the innocent, and get out alive. Daredevil wins despite the odds, but is left aimless. Is Matt a non-profit lawyer? Is Matt a superhero? Is Matt a loyal partner? Is Matt a good man? So many questions that leave Matt finding himself in a bar sharing a beer with the devil. In this comic, the story is based on a mostly true experience that Nascenti had herself, where she found herself alone in a bar on Christmas and listened to the people inside. Brothers that chose different paths, a man bragging about how he used to verbally abuse his wife for years before divorcing, a woman waiting on an extravagant man that'd never show, along with a few more lost souls nursing their beers with nowhere else to go. Yet in comes this woman who seats herself next to Daredevil, stating that for all the good he does being a hero, it's almost funny that he doesn't have anyone to be with on Christmas. No one's ever thought to make Daredevil a Christmas dinner. And why is that? He's a hero. He should have people rallying and celebrating him, but they don't, telling Daredevil that it's because the world is rotten to the core. So if it's already rotten, what's the point in even trying to be better when you can just indulge yourself in the darkness, seducing Matt while all around him the bar flurries into chaos? It's only after this that Matt snaps out of a sort of trance to sense Mephisto before him. Yeah, Matt just kissed Mephisto. Mephisto plunges Matt yet again into the depths of hell to call out his very being, dismantling Matt, calling out his hypocrisy against violence and breaking the law when he is no better, his betrayal of Karen, and his constant confusion of what his place in this world means. It's all been amusing for Mephisto to watch, but now he wants Daredevil to really see how immensely evil he can be. It's throughout this arc Mephisto becomes Daredevil's main villain for a brief period, and it's such an arc to behold. I don't know, there's something that just makes sense about Daredevil fighting the actual devil, especially when he's drawn like this, opting for a slithering humanoid creature aesthetic. I love this, it genuinely works. Matt during this arc is a man of fury. He's tired of suffering, wanting more than anything to kill those that have ruined his life. Yet it takes Daredevil seeing another on the same path to see how far he's fallen, and to finally seek forgiveness. There's a brief instance I really felt was worth mentioning also, where Mephisto meets the Kingpin and basically mocks his existence as well, stating that he's nothing but a speck that believes he's in control of everything, that he's almighty, when he never was to begin with. Just a sad, pathetic man hateful at the world for not bowing down to him, and why would they? Which really crumbles the Kingpin and his whole outlook on his own life. It's here that Nascenti takes Matt and forces him on a journey of redemption and self-discovery, where Matt leaves New York to run away from the guilt of betraying almost everyone he's ever known and for driving out Karen from his life. As we follow Matt bum around from city to city as the rootin' tootin' hero with a dark and mysterious past that helps out the city folk until riding off to wherever the breeze may blow him next, because Matt is just too darn scared to stick to one place too long and fear that if he does, it'll all turn to horseshit. Which it does. Matt sooner or later gets pitted against a myriad of threats like the Blob and Pyro, Ultron sent by Doom just because, which actually turns out in Matt's favor surprisingly enough, with Matt's final foes on the road being the vile demons Blackheart and Mephisto. Swallowing Matt and some fellow travelers into hell, Mephisto attempts to break each of them to no avail. And Matt does not defeat Mephisto with brute strength or some second wind. He defeats Mephisto by going against his own violent nature and strikes at the silver-tongued beast with his own weapon, his words.
Humans know they are both good and evil at the same time. We accept that paradox. That's why we're free. That is our liberation and our hell. You can't show us anything down here we didn't already know. Freedom can be paralyzing if you let it be. Perhaps, Mephisto, it is freedom you fear.
With the help of the Silver Surfer, Matt and the Travelers are able to escape, and the feud between Matt and Mephisto comes to a beautiful conclusion. However, the triumph over Mephisto wouldn't come without a few consequences, because when Matt finally returns to Hell's Kitchen, he's found to have suffered from complete amnesia as a lasting side effect from being in Hell. Without Daredevil to protect Hell's Kitchen, Bullseye swoops in to discredit Daredevil by getting up to some awful things in uniform. You know, stealing from banks, robbing people of their food, and doing an act so fucking vile I can't even say it because of YouTube guidelines. While Matt takes up his father's name, Jack Murdock, becoming a boxer for a brief stint. Inevitably, Matt regains enough of his memory to realize he's Matt and Daredevil through achieving victory within a boxing match, and hearing the crowd roar the name Jack Murdock. Matt remembers his father's final day alive, choosing to win in front of his son instead of throwing the fight, remembering that if his father had taken the dive, Matt's father might have still been alive today, but understanding that if not for his loss, Matt would have never become Daredevil, the man without fear, leading to a final confrontation between Matt donning the identity of Bullseye to face off against Bullseye prancing around as Daredevil, which is quite brutal for two reasons, because not only does he have to dress as the man he hates because he has nothing to wear, but also because Bullseye, I guess canonically, doesn't bathe. The two fight in a battle that'd make you grit your teeth with excitement, since the entire time they're both playing each other, Matt almost too good at playing Leonard, while Leonard keeps tripping over himself, confused whether he's really Daredevil or Bullseye, at one point even saving Matt from dying. It becomes such a spectacle to see that once all the fists are done being thrown and only Matt is left standing, that you feel the same victory Matt must feel to regain himself again. His identity, his life, his achievements. It's liberating. Matt's life is just a constant, never-ending uphill battle that has people lighting him on fire, chucking stones at him, stabbing him, and telling him to run a mile with no legs. That when he gets a victory after so long, especially one as great as your best friend reuniting with you to tell you you can be what you love again, you feel that victory and revel in it for a bit, while Nascenti makes her Irish goodbye for Chichester to take over the reins, setting Matt's trajectory in life to lock in and genuinely destroy Fisk's life, to the point you could almost feel bad for the guy. They even show you flashbacks, dog. Like, you know you're cooked when the flashbacks start playing. And you know what gets even better about this whole thing? Matt's somehow finding the will to genuinely forgive Fisk despite everything he's done. This is a pretty good moment, I'm not gonna lie. It's only afterwards I sort of black out on Daredevil for a bit, since my brain started hemorrhaging every time I forced myself to read 90s Daredevil. With Marvel's attempts to change up the status quo by making Daredevil sport a new black suit and thrusting him into another war against the Hand. Elektra also comes back and she's bald, I guess. When I began reading this arc, it felt like such a sloth to get through that at times I'd put the book down and audibly say to myself, do I really have to read this shit? Because in essence, what's followed up after Nascenti's run and what Chichester did is a good few stories here and there, like Daredevil mentoring Batman, but then a bunch of filler psychological stories about Matt grasping that he's Daredevil while getting facials from Karen, all the while having to recover from complete memory loss because for some reason Matt thought it'd be a great idea to willingly give himself amnesia for a SHIELD mission where only one SHIELD agent would actually know who he was. But hey, at least Matt regains his sight temporarily, ending with Matt not only seeing his best friend's true face for the first time in his life before his vision reverts back, but Foggy also finally figures out that Matt is Daredevil. Can you believe it took this long for him to figure it out? Now you'd think that this would be an insane revelation to Foggy. His best friend, whom he's believed to be blind for decades, is not only blind, but also a fucking superhero. This whole time, Matt has been lying to his best friend and constantly allowing Foggy to worry over his well-being when dragged into his life as Daredevil. Utterly blindsided by this revelation, you'd think he'd be enraged. He has every right to be, yeah? Well, surprise, it's just completely glossed over, because nothing really crazy ends up happening, which kinda sums up how Daredevil had been for a while in the early 90s. But that's not to say that it's not worth reading. There are a lot of genuinely good stories I wish I could tell you in length, but the video would end up being like 19 hours long. I just think it's because this version of Daredevil was in a pretty awkward position at the time that most don't care enough to go and check it out or talk about it. Really only ever chalking it up as filler until Kevin Smith and Joe Quesada made their mark on Daredevil, which is true, I guess, since I asked several comic shop owners or people that read Daredevil under the guise that it was for an essay, how do they feel about early Daredevil when it wasn't written by Frank Miller? And I was pretty much told every single time to not really bother mentioning it, or that it simply wasn't worth reading, and that I should just skip to the more modern stories after Miller's run on Daredevil. Really because they all felt like nothing of significance happened to Matt's life other than in Miller's run and Born Again, which is understandable for like maybe the first 100 issues or so, but I don't think you should just close it off in your mind and then only read from Bendis to the present, because by doing that you are robbing yourself of brilliant storytelling amassed over 60 years by the likes of Nascenti, Mateus, and Jerry Conway. However, I do understand where they're getting at, because since Matt circles back to the status quo before anything can really make a significant impact, with Karen also coming back into Matt's life again, alongside Matt and Foggy rekindling their partnership, it does reinforce the idea that you can just simply start at Kevin Smith's Guardian Devil and fill in the blanks however you want to present day. Since the Owl is still enacting dreadfully outdated crimes, Stiltman is still stilting around, Kingpin is still kingpinning, Bullseye is still bulling it, and Daredevil is back to chucking babies off of rooftops. It's the year 1998. Marvel Comics is on the verge of complete bankruptcy, and coming off of a stint in the comics to desperately revitalize the scene with events such as Heroes Reborn, which didn't prove to be successful at all, Marvel created the Marvel Knights imprint and outsourced 4 titles, those titles being Black Panther, The Inhumans, The Punisher, and Daredevil. Joe Quesada, working alongside Kevin Smith, sought to revitalize Daredevil in Guardian Devil, starting off with Karen leaving Matt, deeming their relationship to be completely unsustainable. Matt, feeling depressed, all alone in his office, is approached by a woman claiming that she has given birth to a child with no father and that God has told her about Matt being Daredevil, thus giving Matt her child and asking him to protect the baby before running off. Well, damn, that's a lot to take in such a short amount of time. Well, then this old dude sort of just comes in and tells Matt that the baby he's holding is the Antichrist, and that he should just throw it off of a roof right now.
Get this shit away from me!
Matt, drugged and manipulated into thinking the baby is the Antichrist through a game of telephone, Karen discovers that she has HIV, and Foggy is also framed for murdering a woman he was actively having an affair with. Everyone's having a great time. Unable to help himself from trying to kill this baby, Matt brings the baby to Mother Maggie, where they finally put an end to the charade with Maggie confessing to being Matt's mother, allowing them to connect finally as mother and son. It's not without anger and resentment, yet it's set aside due to the circumstances at hand for the baby's sake. Throughout the story, Matt is manipulated into believing that God and his warriors are after this child, and it's only through the help of Doctor Strange that Matt discovers that this has all been some well-constructed act with various actors, gadgets, and sets to convince Matt otherwise, dissolving the fears of Foggy going away to prison for life or losing Karen to her supposed HIV. But I feel I have to mention that this reveal doesn't underscore these story beats by any means, because it's these moments between Matt, Foggy, and Karen that are all so genuinely heartbreaking. Matt, before figuring everything out, feels powerless to help his best friend and prove his innocence with barely anything to go on. Even more so that Karen has contracted AIDS and is more than likely given it to Matt as well, having previously gone off on Karen's past for being a junkie and living a life of recklessness, which becomes all the more heartbreaking when this becomes one of the last things he ever says to her. It's story beats like these that make Daredevil feel painfully human, because in situations like these, people aren't just gonna shake it off and be okay. They're gonna say things they don't mean. They're gonna kick and scream and curse at God for letting something as earth-shattering as this happen to them. And the writing for Daredevil on this sort of level just gets better and better going forward with this understandable struggle with faith, as it's later revealed to be Mysterio behind everything, who's been dying from cancer formed in the brain and lungs due to the many years using various toxic gases. Upon finding out that he was dying, Quentin sought to enact his last daring scheme as Mysterio by breaking Spider-Man like never before. Only at the time, Ben Reilly would be in Peter's stead. So Mysterio felt it only fitting that he'd break Spider-Man's second stringer, Daredevil, since Quentin felt like he could relate to Daredevil in some warped way for always feeling like he was always a second stringer. Seeking out the Kingpin and paying him 10 grand, Quentin was given everything he needed to break Matt. Really? Just 10 grand? Only in attempting to enact his big final villainous plan to be immortalized, Daredevil ultimately outsmarted and defeated Mysterio. With nothing left, Mysterio decides it's better to burn out than fade away and kills himself. All this happens after Bullseye comes out the cut and murders Karen in front of Matt with his own billy club, by the way. There isn't some big final battle between the two for vengeance. Bullseye just gets away with it and Matt is left broken, hearing Karen's dying words, "I'll miss you." Karen had died believing that she was going to hell. She had little faith in God, and because of her past and the weight of her guilt on her shoulders, believed herself irredeemable. It's after this, Matt thinks of taking his own life, refusing to live in a world without her in it. But it's through reading Karen's final written words that Matt finds within himself enough resolve to somehow keep moving forward. By the end of Guardian Devil, Matt is trying his best to keep a level head with his double life, but I'd be lying if I said everything goes back to being all hunky-dory again. Foggy goes free after it was all revealed to be Mysterio's master plan, and Matt alongside Foggy decide to jumpstart their own law firm once again, taking a leap of faith that life for himself can't get any worse from here. Surely. Directly after this story, Matt finds out that the old man he saved the day he got his powers as a kid turned out to be a fucking pedophile. This really messes up Matt finding this out, especially since Matt becomes more and more unstable trying to keep his dual life from imploding. It's not just as if the world is closing in on him, it's that Matt's mind is starting to crack under the weight of it. So what better way for Bendis to do his breakout run on Daredevil than to start the run by having Daredevil fix a broken child's mind, raised by the Toad. Can you imagine? being raised by this fucking guy. Abused by the Toad and witnessing him nearly murder Daredevil in front of him, the boy went into a complete state of shock, responsive through hand-drawn comics, with the common trait in all of them being a monstrous Toad trying to kill him and a superhero always dying. Now Ben Urich takes note of this and really wants to help the child. This kid is in a state of shock that looks to be otherwise inescapable, until Ben Urich involves Daredevil and he arrives to help him through his traumatic experience, reaffirming to the boy that his father will never see him or ever lay a hand on him ever again, allowing the boy to see the world in an entirely new light. It's such a beautiful story that's quickly followed up with the downfall of the Kingpin. Echo, also known as Maya Lopez, is a street-level superhero that was born deaf. Raised by an enforcer for the Kingpin, there came a point in time that the Kingpin found no use for this enforcer, and in the enforcer's dying words, begged for the Kingpin to take care of Maya. Watching over Maya, the Kingpin found that she was a complete prodigy, possessing an ability to mimic any person's skills by just looking at them. It'd only be many years later that the Kingpin would attempt to pit Echo against Daredevil, claiming that Daredevil killed her father, only for Daredevil to later clarify that he would have been a child when that had happened. It's through this humorous revelation that the duo quickly put two and two together and realized that the Kingpin killed her father, in which Echo promptly shoots the Kingpin in the face. Now, the Kingpin doesn't die because comics, but he'd end up completely blind, creating a huge weakness for himself that crime families all over New York would take a big notice of. Meet the new guy on the block by the name of Slick. Slick starts working under the Kingpin after his recent blindness, and Slick doesn't quite understand why everyone is working for the Kingpin. Slick thinks the Kingpin is a complete chump just waiting to be clipped, especially because he's blind now. So one day while he's out with his buddies playing poker, word gets around about Matt Murdock and everyone goes quiet. Slick asks why everyone's treating that name like he's Voldemort, to which Slick is told by them all that Matt Murdock is Daredevil. So apparently, word about his identity got circulated through numerous people after Fisk found out, and everyone has just kept it hush-hush. But when Slick finds out, he's like, "Are you guys insane? Why haven't we killed him then?" Everyone goes on to tell him that it's because he's marked by the Kingpin. But Slick says, screw that. No way he knows who Daredevil is and just lets him bust them every now and again with no payback. So Slick gets to convincing all the crime families in New York, including the Kingpin's own son, to start an uprising, telling everyone that the Kingpin's been keeping millions from them, and that worst of all, he's in cahoots with Daredevil to knock out the competition, proposing that if they kill the Kingpin, that Slick will take the reins and treat everyone as equals from here on. So one night, everyone working for the Kingpin gathers together to collectively stab the Kingpin to death. And this is a moment to behold, because right after this, it's all over the papers and the news that the Kingpin is dead. Matt and Foggy can barely believe it. Slick and his new crew are in complete celebration, and Vanessa hires assassins to kill everyone that was involved in her husband's murder, including their own illegitimate son, Richard Fisk, whom Vanessa kills herself. Everyone all over Hell's Kitchen gets clipped except for Slick. With no family left to fall back on to secure his safety, Slick tells the FBI that Matt Murdock is Daredevil and explains everything in explicit detail for the sake of immunity, despite this not quite working out for him in the long run. At first, the FBI thinks it's bullshit, but the more they start to look, the more it starts to make a bit of sense. Now, they're told to keep a lid on the investigation so to keep Matt safe and prevent a blind man's needless death because they quote-unquote thought he was Daredevil. Only one of the FBI agents is found in a big financial struggle, and now he's been handed $1 million ticket to freedom. At first, he tries to be honorable with the info, but when he looks at all of his everyday problems, like his car payments, his overdue credit card bills, and where and how he lives, he says to hell with it all. He doesn't know Matt Murdock, and if he really is a superhero, he can handle it after all. Right? The next morning, Matt's life is over. The newspaper headline reads, "Blind Lawyer Daredevil," with several news crews posted outside Matt's house, bringing sheer chaos to his doorstep. Matt wakes up to his worst nightmare, and when Foggy asks if he has a plan, all Matt can say is that he doesn't, aggravatingly saying that he sort of thought this would never happen, and if it did, it'd happen to Spider-Man, if anyone. It was really here that I fully appreciated Bendis' run, since I found that he really understood every character he was behind the wheel on, whether in funny banter, arguments, inner monologues, or tender conversations. Everyone kind of starts to feel a bit more real, and man, I love Foggy in this run. He's written in a way where it feels like a genuine friendship that has been around for a while. A lot of my favorite moments in this run are purely dialogue scenes between Matt and Foggy alone.
Up our profile.
Get a little press.
It's good for business.
Maybe we could leak it to the press that you're really Wonder Woman.
If I was really Wonder Woman, I would never leave my room.
It's here that basically everyone Matt knows tells him that his life is cooked. Nick Fury asks if Matt would like to fake his death and work for S.H.I.E.L.D. Peter and Ben attempt to throw off the media to no avail, and Matt desperately asks Doctor Strange if he can cast a spell to put the genie back in the bottle. Only he can't. Doctor Strange is such a fucking fraud. I have to air that out for a bit, because not soon after this, Peter's identity gets revealed, and Peter's entire life is outed. He loses fucking everything. And Strange is like, I'll make you the exception. I'll put your identity back into the bottle. But Matt, oh no, he has to figure it out on his own. I know that Matt's life is being torn apart and he's going insane because of it, but you're my man, Peter. I look out for you and only you. Matt has to face this head on and sue the newspaper company that outed his identity for defamation, later managing to win a whopping $40 million, which he chooses to invest into Hell's Kitchen, but that's much later down the road. From here, his life becomes increasingly difficult by day, with his life being a lawyer and a superhero, since a new drug called MGH hits the streets of Hell's Kitchen like a storm, causing total chaos for Matt to stop, while fellow hero the White Tiger ends up accused of murder on top of that, which ends horribly after Matt and Foggy failed to convince the jury that he was an innocent man, since the jury had a bias against heroes. Combined with the supposed news that Matt is Daredevil, it was a trial that was never gonna go in Matt and Foggy's favor, ending with the White Tiger tragically being shot down by authorities attempting to escape his false sentencing. The guilt of this trial weighs heavily on Matt's conscience, and it only gets increasingly worse, because it's after this, when Matt starts going out as Daredevil, that civilians start asking questions like what color their clothes are to totally stump Matt. The Owl hires the best legal team money can buy to record both Matt and Daredevil's voices together to prove they're the same person. And the FBI also starts raiding Matt's apartment regularly, which turns into pure comedy. How did Mr. Rosenthal die?
We'd like to discuss that with you at the local precinct, if you don't mind.
Am I under arrest?
Not at this time. We're just asking you to come with us to the precinct. You can follow us in your car.
I don't drive. I don't have a car.
What's down here?
The basement. I don't have a car. I'm a blind man. Matt is beginning to tread on mighty thin ice to preserve his identity, along with his sanity, with the list of people he can trust dwindling day by day. Yet Matt's exposure doesn't turn out to be all that bad, since Matt ends up falling in love with a woman named Mila Donovan who's been blind since birth. It's on her way home from a get-together with a friend she'd almost be hit by a careening truck before Matt would swoop in at the very last second, saving her. It's here that their romance blossoms rather quickly, since Matt can barely keep himself together around her. Only anytime they try to be with each other, it's brought to a screeching halt by Matt's never-ending roller coaster of a life, with either Bullseye attempting to kill Mila, leading Matt to completely snap and carve a literal bullseye into Bullseye's forehead as vengeance for killing Karen, Typhoid Mary literally burning Matt alive, or the Kingpin hiring some of Daredevil's oldest enemies to kill Matt. You didn't really think the Kingpin was dead, right? Going through rigorous surgeries to rebuild his body, including his sight, because comics, the Kingpin makes his big return to Hell's Kitchen to rebuild the empire that was taken from him. Only Matt, having enough of the Kingpin's bullshit, beats the ever-living dog shit out of him and delivers the Kingpin's carcass to the heart of Hell's Kitchen, unmasking himself to the people in Josie's bar, stating to them that since no one can fix their lives alone, Matt will be their new Kingpin and lord over them to make better decisions. And if they can't for any reason, they have to leave Hell's Kitchen forever. It's through this that Hell's Kitchen actually starts to clean up its act and ultimately becomes completely crime-free. It's not overnight, of course, and Matt has to beat it into a bunch of criminals, but sooner or later, everyone gets the message. Hell's Kitchen gets to rebuilding with the help of Matt's funding. Matt and Mila get married, and all around, life is good as the new Kingpin, while every other city in New York sort of has to pick up Daredevil's slack, since crime didn't exactly end, but only migrated to different areas more and more. But with Matt declaring himself the new Kingpin, it does end up inciting challenge in so many others who crave power. And the FBI begin their investigation against Matt all over again after believing that he's been the Kingpin the entire time. This all at a certain point becomes too much for Matt and his loved ones to bear, leading Matt to suffer from a complete nervous breakdown. Keep in mind, Matt never quite got over Karen's death, and ever since then his life has been a complete, never-ending roller coaster that he so desperately wants to get off of that simply won't ever end, leading Mila to file for divorce against Matt, believing that their marriage was never real and all just a decision made from mania, which stirs up a lot of questions in his head. Like, has his whole endeavor as the Kingpin been some manic episode? Was Matt marrying Mila because he was rebounding from his dead girlfriend all along? Has the pressure from his identity being exposed really gotten to his head? These are questions that Matt sort of has to figure out on his own while teaching the next White Tiger how to be the White Tiger, or Matt going to a Daredevil focus group to hear how he profoundly affected the lives of the people that live in Hell's Kitchen. And then there's this Devil Baby plotline where he has people swallow himself to control them, and it's really disgusting. Please don't show me this again. It makes me want to gouge out my eyeballs. Yet throughout all of this, Fisk all the way in Kansas convinces the FBI and the media that he has a folder on Matt Murdock with terabytes of evidence proving that he's Daredevil, agreeing to give away the folder so long as he can be given freedom and enough money to lead a comfortable life. The director of the FBI is like, shit, I know he's Kingpin. This really, really, really awful guy that deserves to be in prison for life. But Daredevil is always out there saving the day and making my job so easy. I think I'll fuck over Daredevil. It's not too long that word of this Matt Murdock folder gets out into the wild, which stirs up Matt, Foggy, Natasha, and Elektra to steal the file before it can get out. However, the only thing standing in their way is none other than the man who never misses. Bullseye. What follows is a huge raid redemption showdown between Bullseye, Daredevil, and Elektra, till Matt is shot in the chest from an FBI helicopter far enough away that Matt's senses would not be able to detect it. Thus, Elektra forgets about the file and brings Matt to the night nurse to get patched up. Now, it's during this that the Kingpin reveals to the director of the FBI that there was never a Matt Murdock folder to begin with, but that by setting up this entire situation for Daredevil to stop, with Daredevil's blood on the scene to identify Daredevil as Matt Murdock, coupled with the motive of Daredevil seeking to preserve his identity, they get to nab Matt Murdock either way, which doesn't get the Kingpin his freedom, but it does manage to lessen his sentence a bit, leaving Matt with no other way out than to surrender himself. It's not long after that Matt is brought to court for the case of Matt's obstruction of justice as Daredevil, that if Matt is proven guilty, will nullify every case Matt was ever a part of, which could mean that a multitude of villains would be set loose. Matt would also be disbarred, jailed for life, and his entire life, including the lives of all of his friends and loved ones, would be ruined. Upon the judge asking Matt what does he plead, there's a moment I found to be very tender where Matt thinks for a few moments about running away, living in Paris with his wife, and the ugly possibilities that could very well follow in making that kind of an irresponsible decision, in which he decides to stay his ground and plead not guilty, which plants Matt in Rikers prison with everyone he's ever brought down, including the Kingpin. And you thought Spidey's life was worse. We're really spiraling further down the toilet that has become Matt's life. Ed Brubaker starts out his run of Daredevil right where Bendis left off in the thick of it. Matt's imprisoned with everyone he's ever put away as Daredevil, which happens to be a story arc I'm incredibly fond of, for giving Matt a completely new challenge as a hero. Prison changes a person. It gives them a perspective they wouldn't know until landing there. Some can lose their sense of self while in prison, whether to survive or due to the stress and anxiety from constantly having to be on the defensive every waking moment. You also never know exactly who to trust, which further increases paranoia and anxiety. And it's not like if you don't want to be there, you can just leave. You're stuck in it till you serve your sentence. So what does that look like on a hero like Daredevil? It looks mean and ugly and a tragic mess. The FBI and the prison staff want to make Matt's life a living hell as much as humanly possible, working behind the scenes to stall Matt's court date alongside placing him in Gen Pop, hoping he dies before he can even get to trial. There is also a new Daredevil prancing around New York that could be anyone, which terrifies Matt. And to make matters worse, villains like the Kingpin, Hammerhead, the Owl, and Bullseye all want a piece of him, which lands Matt in many instances where he has to defend himself more often than he'd like to, while also inadvertently diminishing his plausible deniability. Because how does a blind man get cornered by 10 guys and walk out the only one unharmed every single time? Matt can't hide that he's Daredevil anymore. Of course, Matt can handle the pressure because after all, he's been trained to handle it, but everyone is scared they'll hear on the news he was shanked in his cell or something. Mila has completely steered clear of visiting Matt in prison, given that the complete awareness of his suffering day by day has made her life unbearable as it is. And Foggy, God rest his soul, can't get a good night's rest knowing something bad could happen to his best friend and there'd be nothing he could do to stop it, which becomes immensely ironic in the coming issues, because it's after a visit from Foggy to discuss their best legal strategy. On the way out, Foggy is shanked to death while Matt is forced to listen in solitary, unable to do a thing to stop it. The cherry on top of it all, the Kingpin laughs his ass off at Matt's cries for Foggy the entire time. Just think about that. Listening to your best friend getting stabbed, the knife sinking into the flesh, hearing your best friend choking on his own blood, hearing your best friend's final heartbeat. All the while, the person you hate most in this world laughs at your pain and suffering. I can't even begin to imagine what that'd feel like, the rage you'd feel. And then dialing that up to 100 because you're Daredevil. It's when Matt is released from solitary that he goes on a warpath, breaking anyone who may have been involved just slightly. Matt gets so brutal, in fact, that he legit breaks every bone in the owl's body as a warning to anyone who may have been involved in Foggy's death that he's coming for them all. Reading this, you can't help but feel Matt's psyche begin to crack going through this downward spiral. Matt is essentially more alone than ever before, and the trail for who hired the hit on Foggy goes completely cold. That is until the supposed killer is found dead in his cell by suicide with a full written Dakota North and Ben Urich make an effort to investigate the guy to find out that a lawyer named Alton Lennox was the last person to visit him in prison. Looking further, they find out that he's connected to some pretty shady shit, like whoever the new Daredevil is in an extremely tight-lipped way. Matt, realizing that he can't get out of prison on his own to chase down this Alton Lennox and figure out why he hired someone to kill Foggy, Matt has to compromise his most basic heroic principles and work together with the last people on Earth he'd ever want to escape with, Fisk and Bullseye. Inciting a riot that causes Rikers to explode with chaos, Matt can't help but feel like he's going down a path of no return, pitting innocent people's lives on the line for the sake of his own, deciding instead to double-cross the wicked pair and work together with the Punisher to escape. Through the course of Daredevil's history with the Punisher, they've always been at each other's throats due to their conflicting viewpoints on reprimanding evil. So I couldn't help myself in pointing out this very sincere moment between the two, because after escaping, Frank takes a moment to express to Matt that he understands his pain. Matt's time in Rikers almost broke him, but there has to be a Daredevil, a hero that can give others hope, something to aspire to be better, since the Punisher can never be that. The Punisher can only ever be a symbol of murder, violence, and vengeance. Hell's Kitchen needs Daredevil, and if Matt goes down the same path as the Punisher, he's not just breaking his moral code, but subsequently destroying the symbol of what Daredevil stands for. It's almost unbelievable that Frank is the one that reminds Matt about what he stands for, but it's something Matt needed to hear more than ever before, right before going off on his journey to avenge Foggy. It's in finding the new Daredevil and fighting him that Matt realizes it's Danny Rand underneath the mask, confirming to Matt that Alton hired him to parade around as Daredevil so the media would think that Matt wasn't actually Daredevil, which throws Matt for a loop because why would this guy put out a hit on his best friend but also try to help Matt at the same time? So to understand this, Matt chases Alton's breadcrumbs across the globe to seek out answers till it all leads him to the last person he'd ever expect to be involved. Vanessa Fisk. See, after Vanessa had killed her own son and fled the country, not shortly after this did Vanessa find out that she was dying. Weirdly, when she found out, the only thing she could think about were her chess games with Fisk and how he taught her to play. Of course, Fisk was an excellent player, but as the months passed, she had to let him win because of his fragile ego. It was also in witnessing how blind her husband truly was and wanting to make Matt's life miserable over a petty feud that she could understand why a person like Matt could get under his skin. And for that, Vanessa blamed the crumbling of her life on not just her husband, but Matt as well, figuring that if she was going to die with nothing left to lose, she could play a game of chess with Matt, having him thrown in jail, sending him on a wild goose chase across the globe, and even having Foggy killed, all to bring Matt to the very edge of the abyss and have the pleasure of watching him sell his soul to have it all back, offering to Matt that if he represents Fisk in court and secures his freedom, she'll gladly give him his life back, but if Matt declines, she'll just as happily expose Matt as Daredevil to the whole world. Matt understands what this ultimatum could very well mean, and instead of choosing, throws the whole game in her face, telling Vanessa to do what she thinks is best, because Matt isn't playing something that was never a game in the first place, somewhat ashamed of Vanessa for stooping herself to her husband's level. Arriving back to his motel hours later to figure out what's next in his crumbling life, it's on the phone that Matt gets some surprising news. The director of the FBI was found dead with a note that clears Matt of all charges. Matt's life hits a total reset button. He gets his freedom back, his wife back, and more importantly, Foggy comes out of hiding. Foggy never really died. It was all just an act construed by Vanessa to start her game with Matt. But what's interesting is how Foggy was affected during witness protection. I mean, the guy grew a mustache. Okay, jokes aside, Foggy writes in a letter never meant for Matt to read that upon discovering he was Daredevil, Foggy was deeply affected by it. Foggy felt ashamed of himself that he couldn't be like his best friend, jumping around from rooftop to rooftop saving lives, and even more so that he let himself always rely on Matt to pull through for him on almost everything. Even when the whole identity stuff occurred and the death of Karen, Foggy still kept believing that Matt could take care of him, until he got stabbed by the hard truth and left in a puddle of his own blood. Foggy had to go into witness protection and come to terms with the fact that Matt wouldn't always be there for him, and that no one was coming to save him, which frightened him like he'd never been frightened before. Which is why Foggy writes the letter to not only acknowledge that he's been in denial about Matt's extraordinarily dangerous situation for so long, but promises himself to be more self-reliant and not to be a burden on Matt anymore. It's a beautiful issue that showcases how much Foggy's friendship with Matt truly means to him. And now that Matt's gotten everything back, there's only one thing he has to do before he can enjoy it. See, Matt feels obligated to honor Vanessa's dying wish, so Matt agrees to represent Fisk and earn him his freedom. Obviously, the two hate the idea, and Fisk would rather die than take Matt's help. But Matt, tired of this game of theirs, decides to throw all his cards on the table, pretty much saying, look, you've taken so many things from me just as much as I have from you. And honestly, there isn't anything left to take. So let's be grown-ups and honor your wife's dying wish. To be a good man, on some level, Fisk thinks about it and finally swallows his pride. Our top story. Wilson Fisk, New York's one-time kingpin of crime, was released from federal custody yesterday after his attorneys effectively argued that the evidence was too tainted to bring him to trial. Of course, the even more shocking part of the story is just who it was who struck this deal for the kingpin. Attorney Matt Murdock, who only recently had his own charges dropped. Authorities are not revealing the details of the deal, but we have confirmed that Fisk left the country early this morning, and sources inside the federal government are indicating that his US citizenship has been revoked.
My darling, Vanessa, my dearest, my life.
Now, it's after this that Matt appreciates everything he's gotten back, but also develops a newfound fear of losing it all once again. I really felt that Brubaker was on a mission to show that despite Matt somewhat getting his life back in order, it doesn't necessarily mean that it'd be easier for him this time. Again, people still think he's Daredevil, and villains in his life cannot be convinced otherwise, which places a lot of elements of Matt's life at a huge risk. Like Matt's already failing marriage being broken down even further by making it so Matt would become more disconnected with Mila than ever before. It's depressing. Mila has been given the gift of her husband back, and all he does is go out as Daredevil. He's never there for her, mostly because by this point he doesn't know how to love her anymore. This also doesn't get any better when a villain by the name of Mr. Fear, who I've failed to mention until now, comes back for revenge against Matt. See, Mr. Fear, also known as Lawrence Cranston, went to the same college as Matt to become a lawyer. However, he was always jealous of Matt for being inherently better than him. So for that, he's always seek to kill Matt, but not before making him live out his greatest fears. Now, Mr. Fear returns for revenge against Matt for getting his life back, while he still has to face the consequences of his actions long ago, dispersing a new fear drug throughout Hell's Kitchen to make its citizens go insane. The mixture is slow acting, but once taken over, it leaves the person's psyche irreparably shattered, always seeking out violence, whether being dealt out onto others or themselves. Mila, infected, attempts to kill a woman named Lily, secretly working for Mr. Fear, only in doing this, accidentally kills an innocent old man in the process, landing her in Bellevue to be evaluated until she can come back to her normal self again. I wanted to take a moment to draw attention to this specific panel of Matt holding on to Mila. This panel to me really just perfectly exemplifies the feeling of, I love this person, but I don't want to let them go. I don't know. It's like, I don't know what the word is. Evocative? I don't think it's evocative. Can you tell that this isn't the scripted part of the fucking video? So it essentially becomes a race against time for Matt to find and claim the cure from Mr. Fear before Mila becomes too far gone. You witness Mila go from this sharp, strong, confident woman to a complete shell of her former self, where Matt has to walk on eggshells around her so to not set her off, and witnessing something like that in front of you is something I wouldn't wish upon my worst enemy. When Matt finally thinks he has hope in saving his wife after defeating Mr. Fear just mocks Matt for being so naive as to think he made a special cure for his new drug. Sure, Matt has put a stop to his reign of terror, but nothing can stop the fact that Mr. Fear has completely won, laughing in Matt's face and completely elated at his own petty victory. It's this realization that Matt failed to save his own wife that Matt is sent into complete shambles. He has to commit his own wife and figure out how to pick up the pieces without her in his life. Like, how do you do that and keep going on? What drives you after something as awful as that? Wrath. Matt is at a point where he's totally consumed with being Daredevil to escape his personal life. Everywhere he turns, he's reminded of how he failed his wife and how more than anything he needs a win, something to lift his spirits, something to tell him that his existence isn't just for nothing. Anything. Enter Lady Bullseye. Almost sold off as a child, Bullseye did a paid hit on the Yakuza, which indirectly saved her life, ultimately inspiring her to one day become just like him. Hence the lady part in Lady Bullseye. Operating with the Hand after the events of Secret Invasion, the Hand seeks to grow stronger by taking on a new leader, Matt Murdock. Initially, the Hand and Lady Bullseye seek to kill those closest to Matt, only to realize that by doing this, they'd be making Matt hate them more than ever before. So in order to bring him in as their leader, they decide to dismantle everything good in Matt's life to the point that the only thing he has left is joining the Hand as their leader. Their plan involves destroying each and every relationship in Matt's life, and it's only when Matt's life is at a complete state of ruin that Lady Bullseye confesses to taking away all of his distractions to become their leader. Matt hears this and sucker punches Lady Bullseye, enraged that his whole life has been torn apart, all for some stupid ninja cult. Denying the offer, Lady Bullseye is left unsurprised and moves on to plan B. That's when we find out what Fisk's been up to. In the time away, Fisk fled anywhere he could where no one knew of the Kingpin. It's in Spain that Fisk finds love with a woman named Marta and helps raise her 2 children. For months, Fisk believed that he could actually live a life without pain, that he could feel love and happiness again, that he could really honor Vanessa's dying wish. But sometimes, no matter how hard you try to escape your past, it's only a matter of time till it comes crawling back. Arriving to Marta's home to find her along with her 2 children cut to pieces by the Hand. Fisk, broken all over again, is offered to become leader of the Hand. Fisk denies their offer and attacks the Hand, killing nearly every Hand ninja in his path. Yeah, maybe if they just asked instead of going the old let's kill his family route, perhaps one of them would have just taken up the offer from the start. Because this leads Fisk to fly all the way back to the States to seek help from Matt to claim his revenge. At first, Matt doesn't like the idea, but when he's reminded that the Hand took from him just as much, if not more, from Fisk, Matt feels he can trust Fisk and join forces to destroy the Hand or die trying. Little does Matt know, however, that the Kingpin is just manipulating Matt so that he can take out his enemies before taking leadership over the Hand himself, in hopes that while doing so, Matt will be slain by the Hand. Yet in Matt surviving every encounter and learning about the Kingpin's actual allegiance to the Hand and his goal to lead it, Matt takes the Hand's offer since he was offered the role first, in hopes that once appointed leader, he can change the Hand's ways for the better from the inside, thrusting us into what is described as Daredevil's most wishy-washy arc, having Daredevil slowly become everything he swore to fight against. Matt becomes the leader of the Hand after proving himself through several arduous trials, like murdering this old blind mentor guy that isn't Stick but like the off-brand Stick. But he doesn't really murder him, he just fakes it so the Hand can trust him. Becoming the leader and gaining the approval of the other 4 fingers, Matt's soon possessed by the beast of the Hand. Puppeteered by the beast, Matt becomes evil Daredevil and constructs a building called Shadowland in the center of Hell's Kitchen, as a monument to the 107 people Bullseye blew up in the beginning of the arc. Matt commands the Hand to watch over Hell's Kitchen and to dispatch anyone who even thinks about breaking the law. At a certain point, Matt loses himself and surrenders to the beast's will, ordering the deaths of those closest to him so that they can't awaken Matt's spirit from within. It's here that chaos eventually erupts throughout Hell's Kitchen, affecting every street-level hero to the point they try to stop Matt. But at the end, it takes both Foggy and Elektra bravely putting their lives on the line to exorcise the beast and bring Matt back, after which Matt leaves New York out of guilt for what transpired in leading the Hand, where we get a really neat story called Daredevil Reborn, which follows Matt trying to find himself again in a small town against a corrupt police force, meeting a young boy who had been blinded by one of the officer's muzzle flashes, and not so long after lost his father because of the police force's corruption. Matt, understanding the boy's pain, gives the kid the justice he deserves, in turn finding a reason to keep being a hero, becoming Daredevil once more, returning to Hell's Kitchen reborn. It's here where we finally come across my favorite Daredevil run written by Mark Waid, and the run that initially made me want to make this video in the first place. See, after all the twists and traumas, the cuts and bruises, the hearts and souls lost to Matt's life as Daredevil, Matt chooses to let it all go, because if he faces against all this pain with more fury any longer, he'll go insane. Instead, simply choosing to stop living his life the same as he's always done, and maybe, perhaps he'll receive some new results. Matt chooses to lead every day with a smile. And yeah, the darkness of his past may creep up on him from time to time, but sometimes you simply gotta fake it till you make it. But is this decision to be happy one that can actually stick? Or is Matt one more trauma away from crumbling back into his depression? That's a question that is certainly put to the test throughout Wade's run, because initially Foggy believes this decision to be of complete mania, but instead of confronting his best friend, believes that Matt's new outlook is changing Matt for the better, but it doesn't mean he's not going to still keep an eye on him. Now, it's in this run that Matt still struggles to convince the public he isn't Daredevil, and let's be honest, by this point, nobody's fooled. But instead of being annoyed by that and worried by that constantly, now he just chooses to have fun with the idea. It's not like the city hates him. After all, he's done so much for it as both Matt and Daredevil by this point. People fucking love him regardless. Like Matt's new love interest, and the one I root for the most, Kirsten McDuffie. She's in the same line of work as Matt. She's cool, she's confident, and she's completely determined to catch Matt as Daredevil, willing to do the silliest things to prove it. It's not like she does this for personal gain or to expose Matt. She really only does this because she knows she's right. At first, their relationship is rooted in this game of cat and mouse, but over time that ends, and it ends up evolving into something loads more serious and romantic, with them learning to love each other and learning to accept their crazy lives together in what had seemed like a completely unshakable relationship. But nothing beautiful lasts forever, especially with Matt, as you'll learn soon enough. Wade also sort of returns Matt to the woe and whimsy of the Silver Age, setting Daredevil in a brilliant and colorful atmosphere again. Although Wade isn't afraid to reel in the much darker moments from time to time. A story I can pull involves the Mole-Man committing grave robbery, indirectly stealing hundreds of bodies, including Matt's father, for the sole reason to be with the body of the only woman who was ever nice to him. As you can imagine, Matt takes this as best as anyone could when faced against someone who desecrated hundreds of people's graves, including his own father, and even worse, isn't able to recover any of the remains, given the Mole-Man's complete disregard for the dead. Despite this, Matt defeats the Mole-Man, steals some of Mole-Man's precious diamonds, and donates them to the cemetery, under the notion that their bodies may never be recovered, but with the eternal glow from the diamonds on each tombstone, they'll shine brightly forever to remind everyone that even in the deepest darkness, there will always be light to be found. Now, whether you're watching this around Christmas time or not, a story that falls around this same time before all hell breaks loose for Matt involves Matt doing an outdoor boys video with several blind kids. I'm joking, of course, but every year around Christmas time, Matt volunteers for a field trip with blind children to get them out of their comfort zones and learn how to operate in the real world. As you can imagine, the worst thing that could happen on this trip happens. Matt alongside the children are now lost in the woods during the dead of winter. Forced to make do with their situation, Matt has to face against the odds, hoping and praying that they make it out alive, walking through the freezing cold hand in hand so to not be separated. The children are terrified, and how could they not be? So you see Matt in a very rare way, how he raises the children's spirits in such hopeless circumstances, asking what the kids want for Christmas or Hanukkah, or teasing the kids, or joking around with the kids by saying if Spider-Man were here, he'd be pissing himself by now. Only at a certain point, the children altogether become collectively frightened. Attempting to gather and calm them, Matt inevitably crumbles from the cold and exhaustion. Yet because of everything he taught the kids along their journey, the kids end up gathering together, creating a makeshift sleigh to carry Matt to nearby shelter with the help of his radar sense directing them. They're able to get warm, able to eat, and able to be with their parents on Christmas. It's like a divine miracle, and perhaps my favorite issue in the entire run. Upon arriving back to life as Matt Murdock, attorney at law, Matt finds that any case he takes, the prosecutor basically just has to say that Matt is Daredevil to rupture his entire defense. Unable to operate in court due to this, Matt instead teaches his clients how to defend themselves, which turns out to be so successful that it lands Matt into one of his most brutal adventures with Dr. Doom. See, in Matt aiding a blind man completely fluent in several languages, the blind man had heard something he wasn't supposed to hear in Latverian. Through protecting the client from several hired assassins and running through the ranks, Matt discovers that the 5 biggest crime organizations in the world are attempting to steal the biggest crime drive in history. Everything and anything that could topple an organization, all inside of a Fantastic Four emblem. Matt steals this and looms it over the crime leaders' heads, and even uses it to completely dismantle one of them in hours. However, with this massive power that Matt's just obtained, Matt also understands that this makes him a huge target, and it's only a matter of time before the actual owner comes knocking. It's here that Matt's endeavors to keep his life together start crumbling by the foundation, because Matt can't help but make things things harder for himself, which in turn wanes heavily on his mental. He wants to go on a date with Kirsten? Well, he owns this data drive that all of crime wants, so they start stalking him and muck that up for him. But Matt doesn't care. All that matters is the drive right now. Okay, so that doesn't work. Oh, how about hiring a bunch of villains to try and kill him where he lives to steal the drive? That doesn't work? How about we inject ourselves somewhere in Daredevil's loved ones' personal lives, like say a therapist, and gaslight his best friend to believe that Matt has gone insane? Sure, his life as Daredevil I guess you could say is squeaky clean, but like always, Matt gets too involved with Daredevil and never bothers to turn around to check on Matt Murdock's life until it's too late. So when Matt finally does decide to turn around and prioritize his regular life as Matt Murdock and have things go back to whatever normalcy he can manage, Matt gets teleported to Latveria against his will. Matt is subsequently tortured for crimes against the nation of Latveria and stripped of all of his senses. It's one of the most brutal things done to Matt I think ever, because Doom makes sure that Matt is left in a constant state of awareness while feeling nothing at the same time. Luckily, it's through Matt's senses that over time build a tolerance to the various drugs inhibiting his abilities that Matt is able to narrowly escape with his life after calling in the Avengers for help. Taking days to recover and Hank Pym having to fight off microbots in Matt's brain, returning to his normal life, it's by this point that Foggy wholeheartedly believes that Matt is finally at his breaking point. Even more so after looking through his desk to find his father's remains inside his drawer. His father is in his drawer. Believing that his best friend has lost it, Foggy fires Matt and tells him that he needs actual help and to never rely on him again. Matt is left astounded by Foggy's behavior, unable to understand why Foggy won't give him the benefit of the doubt, that what's happening is the work of some villain possibly, especially given the world they live in and the lives they lead. Yet Matt respects Foggy's wishes and leaves to figure out what's actually going on. Investigating who could have put his father's remains in the drawer, Matt arrives home to find Mila in his bedroom waiting for him. What? Having not seen Mila for quite a while, Matt is both shocked and heartbroken by the sight of her, calling Foggy to pick her up. However, when Foggy arrives to Matt's apartment, he finds no one, and further believes that Matt is going crazy. It's here that Matt dives into a rabbit hole wondering who could make it so a person is one place and then gone the next, figuring out that the Spot is behind this for revenge against a job turned sour months prior. Only in tracking him down, he gets decapitated by a new haunting villain known as the Jackal, who uses the Spot as a conduit to kidnap and decapitate others or smuggle drugs into pregnant women across the globe. Matt just so happens to be one of these jobs, and through sheer force of will manages to use just his body to put a stop to the Jackal's games, managing to reunite the Headless back to their bodies. When demanding to know who hired the Jackal to make Matt look like he was insane, all the victims of the Jackal swarm him before he can even get an answer. With the trail gone cold, all Matt can do is come back home and convince Foggy about the whole plot to make him look insane. It goes over a bit rocky with Matt amazed that Foggy couldn't believe him, but Foggy takes a moment to justify his anger. Foggy felt as though Matt was avoiding his problems, avoiding his own life, and Foggy needs Matt to be there to face his own problems, to show Foggy how he can do the same thing, more than ever before, because Foggy reveals a big secret that he's been hiding for some time. That Foggy has cancer. How bad the cancer is remains to be discovered, but until then, Matt works to lift Foggy's spirits in any way possible. Only while flying Foggy through the city, Matt's time with Foggy gets cut short when he hears complete chaos going on in Hell's Kitchen. Matt discovers the people causing the chaos are those that have been blinded and subjected to the same chemical that gave Matt his radar sense. Several random violent individuals now possessing the same abilities as Daredevil. Naturally, Matt is able to dispatch these people with relative ease from decades of experience, but the only thing that Matt can think about while this occurs is who could be behind this. This is the work of someone with deep hatred for Daredevil and someone who's had a lot of time to think about it. However, that has to be put on hold, since Foggy's appointment to find out how bad the cancer could be takes complete priority over anything else. It's gonna be okay. It's gonna be fine. I can read the doctor. I can feel it. Poor Foggy, though. He's trying to play it cool, but his heartbeat's so loud I don't even recognize it. It's not Foggy's. I'm sorry. From here on, Foggy goes through chemo, and now more than ever, Matt the Man Without Fear starts to feel fear. He's fearful that he'll not only be unable to protect his friend, but also be completely unable to save him, as Foggy's cancer with treatment only really gives him a 10% chance of making it out of the woods alive. This genuinely sinks Matt into despair, questioning why it's always the good things in his life that have to suffer while the bad keeps on keeping on. A moment that makes me cry pretty much every time I read this run is when Matt's outside Foggy's hospital room. He's had to break away for a moment because all the chemicals through Matt's senses made him sick, and it's when Matt walks back to Foggy's room, he stops himself for a moment to brace himself, to put on a happy face, to be a light for Foggy even when he's at his lowest. Because even though Foggy may have little chance of making it, and Matt may feel at his most hopeless just waiting for the pin to drop on Foggy's life at any point in time, Matt doesn't want to pull him down with him, to lose what makes Foggy Foggy, his monumental optimism. Faced with this head on, it's through one of the people experimented on from earlier providing answers to Matt that Matt jumps at the opportunity to be Daredevil, to take out his feelings of powerlessness and fury onto someone possibly responsible for tormenting him. However, when led to an abandoned warehouse, he's met with just that, a new foe by the name of Akari, Japanese for fury. The fight between the both of them is utterly brutal, as Akari is a complete warped reflection of Daredevil, trading over 100 vicious blows on one another that leads Daredevil more often than not staggered by the fury that is Akari. Faced with very few options, Matt tries to counter Akari's radar sense, hoping to get the drop on him to win the fight, and possibly secure himself the answers to why he's been tormented for so long. Only Matt's fatal mistake was thinking that Akari had only possessed a radar sense of his own, never once thinking for a moment that Akari possesses sight, because when Daredevil reaches for a bat to strike Akari, Akari looks right at Daredevil and says, "You should pick the red one," before beating Matt within an inch of his life and sending the Man Without Fear running scared. Matt doing anything he can to lick his wounds. Akari is practically around every corner, keeping Matt in a constant state of fight or flight. Everywhere he goes, Matt has no idea what to believe. So Matt goes to the only person on Earth he can completely trust, telling Foggy everything that has happened to him. It's only while Foggy draws up a list of the people Matt has faced up against and the various things that have happened involving his father's body, Mila's appearing in Matt's apartment, and the people experimented on, that they both finally figure out that the person who's been pulling all these various strings to get back at Matt is none other than Bullseye. At first, they both don't want to believe it. Matt stabbed Bullseye through the chest and killed him after all. But let's face it, they live in a world where anyone can die and come back. Calling in some favors to track down and cross-reference the orders of the radioactive isotope used to create Daredevil and where they had been received, it leads Daredevil directly to Bullseye, now referring to himself as the Mastermind. Now encased inside of a metal cocoon, barely alive ever since his death at the hands of the evil Daredevil. Bullseye's body had been secured after the events of Shadowland by Lady Bullseye, and to that end, had various hand rituals conducted to resurrect him. Inevitably, Bullseye had been brought back from the dead, but in doing this, Bullseye had been rendered mute and completely paralyzed. Over the course of a year, stewing on pure hatred, feeling as if every hour was a day and a day a year, Bullseye had nothing else to think about other than how he'd be the man to finally break Daredevil. Bullseye was given the ability to command Lady Bullseye and his followers to strategically torture Matt Murdock till he'd be just as broken as himself. However, what Bullseye couldn't and will never account for is that Daredevil has always been better than him, managing to beat Bullseye at his own game, dispatching both Lady Bullseye and Akari 2-1, and exposing Bullseye to the gallons of radioactive chemicals used to torture so many innocent lives. Not killing Bullseye, yet stripping him of the very few senses he still had remaining, a punishment fit for a vile man such as Bullseye. With that fiasco out of the way, Matt has time to dedicate himself to taking care of Foggy and spending as much time as he possibly can with his best friend. In the middle of tending to Foggy, one of Matt's bullies from elementary school comes to Matt for help. Matt, agreeing to help, finds out that his bully used to work for the Serpent Society, a group of fanatical psychopathic racists intent on ruling the world. And because of this guy's departure from the Serpent Society, it makes him a target in their organization, which thrusts Matt into the middle of the Serpent Society schemes, finding out that they have serpents placed in every branch of New York's system, anywhere from construction workers to officers of the law to the friggin' judges themselves. Learning of this, it's not long after Matt meddling in the Serpent Society schemes that the Serpent Society approaches Matt and threatens to blackmail him by exposing his secret identity to the public. And yet this is something that Matt can't simply let go. He's based his whole life around justice, and to see it being tainted and contorted to fit the Serpent's will is something Matt just won't stand for. Knowing that there's a definitive way to dismantle their society if he outs himself to testify against them, it's a choice that isn't easy to make. There are so many things that could be affected by a change as radical as that, but to Matt, it's worth it in the end. As Matt takes the stand to testify in court against the Serpent Society, not as Matt Murdock, but as Daredevil. A true testament to what Matt is willing to give up in the name of justice. Only, as a fatal result, Matt is disbarred in New York, and with not many options left, Matt moves back to San Francisco, partnering with Kirsten McDuffie. Now, despite turning a new page in his life, living out in the beautiful city of San Francisco, I have to say that for Matt constantly seeking to overcome his depression, San Francisco was just the spot to do it. Shit, I thought Cupid's Span was just a comic thing till I found out it was for real. It's fucking incredible. However, despite living 2,000 miles away from Hell's Kitchen, Matt is still faced with ever-growing difficulties, such as Foggy's cancer, adjusting to a life as both superhero and super celebrity, Iron Man giving him his sight along with a side of brain damage, and a relentless wave of villains thrown against Matt that are either new or quite familiar, like the Shroud seeking to dismantle Matt's life, or the Owl coming back with the ability to basically see everything through technology, or a run-in with the Purple Man set on killing his own purple children because they refuse to love him. Protecting the purple children, it sends Matt teetering on the edge of depression all over again, which isn't made any better when Matt is given flashes of his father hitting his mother in his early childhood, which had been long forgotten until re-emerging from an event called Original Sin. Original Sin was an event that acted as a way for characters to find out terrible secrets that they were never meant to know, like Thor finding out that Gore was always right, making Thor unworthy, or Peter finding out that the spider had been another named Cindy Moon who had been locked away for over a decade, or that Johnny had tampered with a machine that could have been Ben's only chance at a permanent cure. Now, Matt sees this memory of his father's supposed abuse and seeks out his mother Maggie to find out more. Going through a whole adventure to save her from a prison in Wakanda, when asked about why his mother left, Maggie, shocked that Jack never told him, explains that she left to save Matt, that in the time she would take care of Matt as a baby, Jack would go out onto the road to make money as a boxer. During that time away, Maggie loved Matt but also hated him. She'd have hideous thoughts that she was failing Matt, that she was the worst mother imaginable, that she was the worst person imaginable. At the time, postpartum depression was something doctors just brushed off as baby blues, something that'd be overcome with relative ease. But it's an illness, and one that can feel impossible to overcome due to how frightening it can become. Because at a certain point, Maggie had believed from sheer paranoia that Matt was sent down to destroy her life, to laugh at her torment, and so she tried to attack Matt, ending with her tripping onto the floor, realizing that she had lost herself completely, in which Maggie soon fled as far away as she possibly could from her old life, traveling all over the world to do some good, in hopes that she could feel redeemed for ejecting herself from her own son's life. Yet no matter where she turned, she could never escape that pit of shame. She could never return to Matt's life and fear that Matt would hate her for failing him. But Matt looks at his mother and says, "How could I hate you? I didn't even know you. Had I known you, this would have explained so much." Over 10 to 20% of mothers deal with postpartum depression all over the world, and it's not something that can be controlled, and it's most certainly something that isn't their fault. Matt doesn't shame her for it. He instead understands her and remains proud of her journey, managing to pull herself out of a suicidal depression by faith and sheer force of will to become a force for good, wishing that we could all fail so tragically, as they embrace one another in complete forgiveness against a most beautiful sunrise. This, in my opinion, is one of the greatest moments in Daredevil's entire history that just never gets brought up, and I felt that if I didn't mention it myself, I'd think of myself as a fraud until my dying day. Now, it's after this that everything begins to clash together into one big final move by the Shroud, exposing Matt, Kirsten, and Foggy's personal lives alongside Matt's list of various clients' secrets. With the city of San Francisco turned against Matt and his loved ones in danger, Matt has no other option than to make a deal with the devil himself, the Kingpin. Understanding that the Kingpin has various assets that can secure his loved one's safety and freedom, Matt offers the Kingpin to save them, and in exchange he can wipe Matt off the face of the earth, change his face, control his life, and make him live in a living hell of the Kingpin's creation. As sweet as the deal may be to the Kingpin, Fisk instead uses Matt's desperation to take advantage and erase Matt's loved ones from the face of the earth, leading to a most brutal and crimson showdown between the two. That isn't just a test of Matt's physical skill, but a battle against the shadow casted inside Matt's soul, managing to defeat the Kingpin, and in turn regaining the good graces from the people of San Francisco despite facing disbarment once again. Markaway doesn't leave Matt off in a worse place than when he started his run on Daredevil, but instead he leaves Matt in a state of happiness. Foggy's cancer ends in remission. Kirsten stays with Matt despite the dangerous life he leads, and Matt overcomes his depression. Finally, realizing that the light is nothing to be afraid of, that we always have a chance to overcome, and in the end will grow stronger for it. Hold that thought, I gotta take this. Yeah, hello?
I'm just gonna decide to change everything and erase all of it.
What?
Yeah, I know. It's something you just gotta deal with.
What do you mean you're just erasing
I
everything?
don't know what to tell you, man. It's just gone.
Hello? This run is one I'm very indecisive over, simply because when Charles Soule took over Daredevil immediately after Wade, Soule sought to basically undo everything that had been built up with Daredevil as a character for the last decade, most specifically sealing the genie back in the bottle in the form of Matt's identity as Daredevil. At a certain point during Soule's run, he was asked at a convention about this by a fan.
The end of Mark Waid's run put Matt with his secret identity out in the open. Was there ever any consideration to not giving back his secret identity or having others besides Foggy remember he was Daredevil?
To which Soule said,
"Nope, I wanted Matt to be able to practice law, because I'm an attorney myself, and if he was a known vigilante, it would have been impossible to do that sort of straight-up procedural I wanted. The secret ID was part of the package from my first pitch."
Now obviously he got the job and practically pulled a one more day on Daredevil, which is explained through a series of flashbacks throughout the story. It's not handled poorly, but it's just something that I particularly don't like. Matt's life, to put it simply, became hell on earth. He couldn't be a lawyer anymore. He was chased everywhere he went for being a celebrity, and his loved ones were in constant danger due to his identity being exposed. Having to return to New York for a brief period to catch his bearings, it turns out that the Purple Man had escaped prison and had created a machine with the ability to broadcast his will all across the world. The Purple Man uses this machine, which is powered by his purple children, to create chaos. The remaining purple children in hiding seek out Matt to help save the others, which leads to a battle of wills between Matt and the Purple Man, with Matt shining above through his unbreakable spirit. It's in this that the purple children feel obligated to reward Matt by restoring his secret identity using the machine. They do this without his say-so, though. Thus, all over the world, the very idea of Matt being Daredevil is entirely erased. With this, Matt is able to have his old life again and only tells Foggy he's Daredevil, which leads to a massive schism between Matt and Kirsten that ends in their complete separation. It most certainly sucks, and it leaves a sour taste in my mouth, because I'd been invested in Matt's journey and how he continued to handle being a hero with no secret identity. But hey, at least all of his villains are back in the dark and Matt can have his old life again, right? However, I'm not really a big fan of this story beat because it really works to erase a lot of the impact and lessons Matt had to learn in being Daredevil. There's also the inclusion of several new characters, with most notably Blind Spot, Daredevil's sidekick, also known as Samuel Chung, possessing an invisibility suit. He's also adept in acrobatics and martial arts, and Blind Spot works under Daredevil to become a better hero for the sake of Hell's Kitchen, going on adventures to save his mother from the Ten Fingers personal cult, and crossing paths with the artistic villain who uses the blood of his victims for his works of art called the Muse. The Muse is really one of the major highlights of Soule's run because of his deeply disturbing and cold persona, with the strange power to make anyone close to him have immense sensory overload, which throws Daredevil off of his game severely. It's through this that the Muse kidnaps and takes Blind Spot's eyes from him, and later is subsequently eliminated after Blind Spot made a deal with the Beast to regain his sight. After which the run sort of takes a nosedive in story arcs that in my honest opinion didn't feel that notable enough to mention, other than Fisk becoming mayor despite his past as the Kingpin and hiring Matt to be his right-hand man. Fisk, appointed as mayor, immediately sets out to ban all vigilantism in New York to gain further control. Only while this goes on, the Hand targets Fisk and nearly succeeds in killing him, which leads Matt to become mayor in Fisk's stead very briefly, working to undo everything Fisk set out to accomplish as fast as possible, like releasing arrested vigilantes, firing Fisk's corrupt agents, and hiring Foggy on as his chief of staff to help Matt while he operates as Daredevil. It's incredibly brief, and Fisk wastes no time coming back as mayor. And with Matt resigning as deputy mayor, Matt learns through his increased hearing as he leaves the building that Fisk rigged the election. Go figure. Which builds up to the death of Daredevil. I've seen through a few different threads that this story beat causes a ton of discourse for its ending, but it's a story I do genuinely love in the run, as it begins with Matt on a seemingly perfect day. There's a truck careening, a boy about to be struck, and a decision made faster than thought, saving the boy only to end up half dead. Matt is miraculously brought back from the verge of death, making an astounding recovery, to the point he's back as Daredevil and finally ready to put a stop to the Kingpin's plans. Only a new assassin hired by the Kingpin called the Vigil stands in his way. Throughout the story, several characters in Matt's history come back to aid him, like Stick, Elektra, and motherfucking Stiltman, with everything really kinda going in Matt's favor for once. Kingpin is forced to relinquish his role as mayor. All his villains just kinda die. Hell's Kitchen is safer than it ever was when he entered this world, and it just seems like Matt has gotten everything he's ever wanted. But then reality sets in. The Vigil strikes at Daredevil, and upon being unmasked by Matt, Matt finds that the Vigil bears the faces of everyone significant throughout his entire life, all telling him to look. Coming to find that he never even left the operating table. There is no miraculous recovery, no glorious takedown of the Kingpin, no Hell's Kitchen better than how he found it. All it turned out to be was just a man trying not to die and DMT flooding his brain, wondering to himself that even if he does survive this, what will it all even amount to? Daredevil fights evil, it comes back. He fights it, it comes back. He fights it again, it comes back. Forever and ever. Matt thinks about giving up until he sees Karen Page. She tells Matt that he did everything he could, and as the heartbeat monitor draws blank, Matt says that he cannot see the light, so he will be the light. He is Daredevil, and he is the man without fear, making the choice to keep fighting on, as Soul's run comes to a complete close with one final heartbeat on the monitor. It is a bit cheap, I guess you could say, with the whole, oh, it was all just a dream scenario, but sometimes I do kind of like it when it's pulled off correctly. Because when you do read this arc through the lens that this all isn't real, it manages to make perfect sense. All these great things coming towards Matt's way are just too good to be true. It manages to make perfect sense. Almost like he's in the Vanilla Sky simulation, just getting everything he ever wanted until it becomes a weird, unending nightmare. Which is why I do quite like this arc overall, but still, I can understand why most don't. Soul's run is okay, but it doesn't hold a candle to how Zdarsky handles Daredevil when the reins are passed over to him. Zdarsky begs a question to Daredevil. Can one's inner darkness really define them, or can one spin that darkness into something as a force for good through great effort? Seeing Matt in a stage of recovery after the accident, in the start of this run, it's dreadfully clear that Matt isn't the same man he was physically or mentally. It's a slow burn of a run, setting Matt on a path of understanding, redemption, and growth, taking Matt back to his roots to relearn how to be the man without fear, without drowning under a tsunami of guilt. Whether you're a fan of Zdarsky or not, I believe that his double feature on Daredevil is truly something to behold, and a run you should certainly read for yourself. Since when I read his Daredevil, I really felt an essence of Frank Miller's run, bringing back the more gnarly and darker tones from that series that really sought to put Matt as a character to the brink. Anyway, I'm rambling. Let's get into it. It's after months of recuperating in the hospital after the accident that Matt starts to slowly come back into his own life. Taking painkillers to numb the pain and seeing numerous women, it's not enough for Matt. He needs to be Daredevil, leading Zdarsky to pose another question to the reader about Matt. Has Matt been Daredevil all this time because he believes in justice, or has his mission as Daredevil all been an excuse to get off on violence? It's in Matt getting back into the swing of things as Daredevil, really overestimating himself, that he accidentally kills a man during a botched liquor store robbery. Matt is broken, and it's going to take a lot more than putting on the uniform to call himself Daredevil again. Having no idea he killed this guy, all over New York, word gets out that Daredevil has killed a man in cold blood. Matt's life as Daredevil is eerily shattered overnight, just sleeping off the pain. Fisk is elated by this, so Fisk involves a lieutenant by the name of Cole North that despises vigilantes because, yeah, maybe Daredevil accidentally killed this guy, but it's not like Cole could exactly hide behind a mask when he had to come to terms with the fact that he shot a kid by accident. Cole had to take responsibility and face numerous consequences. Fisk takes note of this and points Cole at Daredevil and fires, knowing Cole is never going to stop until the man behind the mask takes accountability for what he's done. Initially, when Matt gets the news that he's murdered someone and is now public enemy number one, he doesn't believe it. Matt refuses to accept he could have made such a cataclysmic mistake, shifting the blame to Kingpin, convincing himself that this is all a part of the Kingpin's machinations to further his ban on superheroes. This isn't out of character for Matt to think after all. I mean, you've been watching this video. Fisk is willing to do anything to ruin Matt. Yet when interrogating the doctor that pronounced the man dead, Matt reads his heartbeat and finds that everything the doctor says is true. Daredevil struck at the man with so much force to the head, he died before he even reached the hospital, with the doctor claiming that with all of Daredevil's victims he's had to patch up over the years, and seeing just how calculated Daredevil really truly is hurting these guys so they live the rest of their lives with some kind of pain, the doctor accuses Daredevil of liking the violence, and if he really wanted to do some good, Daredevil should have become a doctor instead. On Matt's next stop, he watches Fisk's office waiting for him to admit to framing Daredevil for murder. Only the moment never comes. So it's while Matt studies the crime scene to see if he missed something, Cole North opens fire on Daredevil and chases Daredevil through the streets of Hell's Kitchen until Matt is ultimately cornered. No one wants to arrest Daredevil for all the good he's done, yet deep down they all know that he needs to be brought in, leading Daredevil with no other option but to brawl against North and fail miserably due to the injuries sustained during the chase. Arrested and nearly unmasked, Matt's brought to the back of a police cruiser to be taken away to the station, but not before good old Frank Castle can intervene and save Matt's ass. See, one of the most interesting things about this run is that after Matt had killed, Frank was under the assumption that Daredevil had finally seen the light. That in order to get rid of crime, you have to take criminals down permanently. So kidnapping Daredevil and strapping him to a chair, Punisher's like, yeah man, you're just like me now. How does it feel? Feels fucking awful. In order to break free and kick Frank's ass, Matt initiates Aura Protocol number 11, taking Frank's weaponry and using it against him. But not before he could say that with a gun, Frank can be a demon. But for Matt, he'd be the devil. Okay, I'm making this interaction a bit of a joke, but there's more to it than that. Because while Matt has killed and Frank thinks he's just like him, Matt says, yeah, I have killed, but that doesn't mean I'm going to kill my soul along with that. I'm going to learn from this, and I'm never going to let myself get over it. I'm going to be better. It's after taking down Frank that Matt discovers the owl is coming into a large possession of drugs that he's planning to disperse throughout Hell's Kitchen. And Matt, kind of knowing that his days as Daredevil are finished, decides to go out in a blaze of glory, taking out the owl's shipment as his last good deed before being brought in. And doing this, it's hard to watch. He makes careless mistakes, he goes in a situation without thinking 20 steps ahead, and has trouble taking down small-time crooks when he used to be able to take down 100 men in his path with relative ease. Eventually passing out and awakening in Luke's apartment, Matt is happy that the bust was successful, and glad that it's his friends that are the ones to bring him in. However, the three of them, as it turns out, have no intention of bringing him in at all, kinda just saying to Matt that people die in this line of work sometimes. It just happens, and frankly, they're a bit surprised it hasn't happened to Matt sooner. This revelation doesn't blow over well for Matt, and he calls everyone in the room murderers. Running away back to his apartment, Matt thinks about the guilt over killing someone and how he can work to redeem himself further. Only it takes who Matt describes to be the best of them all to shut it down completely. Spider-Man. Spider-Man shows up in Matt's apartment and states that he doesn't know who he is. He knows that he used to know, but that doesn't matter. Daredevil's accident, his tirade against the police, and then his brazen attempt at a drug bust which could have hurt innocents. Spider-Man plain and simply tells Matt that he's done. Daredevil is over, and Matt doesn't fight back, because he knows it's true deep down. So he sits down with tears streaming down his face, thinking about something a priest of his said many years ago when he first began his journey. Cast out the devil. Now, between becoming the god without fear and attempting to lead a normal life as best as he can, Matt sticks to being a probation officer. He stays awake at night phoning the police hundreds of times about crimes he can hear across the city, and regularly visits church to speak with a nun named Elizabeth. She'll become super important later. It's the kind of normalcy, though, that Matt needed to have before anything else. But he doesn't understand his place in the world anymore, famously asking Reed if he thinks God exists and if there is a heaven or hell, which Reed remains indifferent, because this guy will do anything other than admit that magic or God could be real. But since he's actually met God, that if he's questioning if he's worthy of seeing the pearly gates, he thinks that's something that Matt has to figure out on his own and come to terms with himself. It doesn't help that through being a probation officer, Matt happens to stumble upon the brother of the man he killed, which directly gives Matt the perspective that God is punishing him for his crimes and showing him that even if he can quit being Daredevil, it doesn't mean the consequences necessarily end there, especially once this guy finds out that he's Daredevil only 5 seconds later, which ends up ramping Matt to question if he can really lead a life without being Daredevil, since Mother Elizabeth approaches Matt about a child gone missing which Matt could save because of his abilities. Now Matt can't help himself but save the child, and beyond this finds that he is Daredevil no more, yet doesn't stop himself from compromising further. Matt can go bigger. He can take down the much larger problem at the root. He can seek out the systemic corruption and go from high-ranking official to another to make the city a better place. Only problem is, he's not who he was, which Elektra takes notice of. Elektra, running into Matt after getting his ass handed to him by corrupt policemen, basically tells him that if he wants to get good and not buns at fighting, she'll just teach him everything all over again till he's competent, which brings them into the Stromwind's atmosphere. Because as it turns out, the root of the systemic corruption of New York comes down to just one family, responsible for essentially everything: communications, land, businesses, the authorities, everything. The Stromwinds, to sum up, are basically rich evil people that possess an indescribable amount of power that stretches across everything to the point it frightens even the likes of Wilson Fisk. Which is funny given how much power Fisk has been shown to have for all these years. But because of his position as mayor, the role of the Kingpin had to be abandoned for the sake of his plans. And yet Wilson Fisk as mayor is sort of the equivalent of what it would look like if Tony Soprano actually decided to run his garbage disposal company. Most of the time as mayor, Fisk is presented to be quite reserved when it comes to getting anything done other than legalizing drugs, promoting guns, promoting corrupt officers, and putting an end to superheroes. Fisk is otherwise incompetent when addressing the ever-increasing threats of crime, unemployment, poverty, and housing. It's fairly obvious that when in a room of the top families in New York like the Stromwinds, he's the sad clown they can all poke fun at for his criminal past. Because while Fisk presents himself as a man of the people, a man redeemed, it's nothing but a charade that they all see right through. Fisk is still and will always remain a monster, and the Stromwinds use that to their advantage to keep him under their thumb. Back to Murdoch feeling useless as shit, Elektra reteaches Matt the art of being competent, and after weeks of training both body and mind, it eventually directs them towards the Stromwinds databanks. Heavily guarded by hired ninjas, infiltrated infiltrating their systems and dispatching the ninjas, Matt feels like he's worthy enough to be a hero again, while Elektra manages to steal $3 billion to donate to various charities and save enough for herself for her big strong army she's building. Going their separate ways, Matt returns to the home of the brother of the man he accidentally killed to find his mother home instead. At first, he tries to play it off as if he's just there to check up on the guy, but the mother knows that he's Daredevil. Matt expects her to be hateful, yet the mother forgives him. She can see that he's been torturing himself for what he's done, and has no doubt that what happened was an accident. She knows that Matt is a good man. Her son just chose the wrong path that led up to that moment, and nothing can ever change that. So instead of holding on to the pain and hatred, she lets it all go and forgives Matt, with them embracing one another. Alright, enough of that sentimental shit. Let's get some action going, yeah? So during the time that Matt was getting into the swing of things, Cole discovers that basically 70% of the force is corrupt and wants him dead. They kill his partner, and with no one to trust, Cole turns to Matt, who's not quite Daredevil yet, and they team together to find out who's behind everything. Long story short, it's all between the Stromwinds commanding Hell's Kitchen to be ignored by the police to raise the level of crime, the Owl on a quest to become the Kingpin, although lacking the abilities it'd take to become Kingpin tremendously, gangs left and right turning on one another, till it all finally explodes into chaos with the Stromwinds' personal death squad comprising of Stiltman, the Rhino, Bullet, Crossbones, and Bullseye wreaking havoc upon Hell's Kitchen. It all unfolds into a complete catastrophe. People are dying. People are uniting against a force they know they cannot defeat. It's a situation that requires all hands on deck, which awakens a fury in Matt, seeing his home destroyed, his people slaughtered. Matt once again dons the Daredevil cowl and locks in. Fisk even goes out of his way to get into the fight to protect his city, and remember Elizabeth?
She's Typhoid Mary. Let's go!
Now this becomes the ultimate test for Matt. Can Matt say that he's capable of being Daredevil once more? Well, by the end, after taking down each crazed individual and saving Hell's Kitchen, Matt knows without a shadow of a doubt that he's Daredevil. And now more than ever that he needs to face up to what he's done and turn himself in for the man he murdered. From this point on, take everything as the way of the world it's set in, because it does get a bit silly. But upon Daredevil being turned in, Foggy manages to work out a way where Matt can turn himself in, but in a way where he doesn't have to reveal his identity, by simply listing Daredevil as a separate individual from his secret identity. Now Matt could just retire from Daredevil and become a new superhero or something, but Matt believes that this is something he has to do. He has to set an example that superheroes need to take accountability for their actions. Set in his ways, Foggy teams up with Kirsten McDuffie to work at a defense to prevent Daredevil from having to go to prison, which also painfully has to involve Mike to pose as Matt to preserve Matt's secret identity. With only 8 days before the trial of his life, he has to settle a few loose ends before it goes down, teaming with Spider-Man to scare the daylights out of crime in Hell's Kitchen and make up with the guy, and demanding that Tony buys out all the property of Hell's Kitchen and rent it out to the community for next to nothing before the Stromwinds can buy the property and use it for whatever evil richness they intend to do with it. Keeping it short, on the day of the trial, it turns out that Elektra outbids Tony, and instead of Matt choosing to go on with the trial for his freedom, chooses to plead guilty and head onto a bullet train straight to Rikers. Something I can appreciate about Rikers is that they really care about Daredevil, because they went through the effort of making him a prison Daredevil mask to go with his prison outfit. It's so sweet of them. Now it's while in jail again. Elektra visits Matt to warn him of the coming threat of the Hand, and that in order to defeat them, they need to assemble a clan of their own called the Fist and lead it side by side as king and queen. Only Matt doesn't trust Elektra for her tendency to be incredibly flip-floppy. So Elektra scoffs at Matt and becomes Daredevil to protect the streets of Hell's Kitchen the way Matt would while he serves his prison sentence. After which, Matt has an incredibly stressful time in prison, having to fight inmates that want a piece of him every day, having to fight off evil symbiotes. It's a whole thing, don't think about it. And then he has to act as a man on the inside to dissolve a shady project being undergone by the warden directly under the prison. It's a lot for Matt to handle, and it really gets to him a good time or two in this arc, to the point everyone in Matt's life has an intervention with Matt to basically say that what he's doing is pretty senseless, because if he were out in the city, he'd be doing more good than being stuck in prison to clear his own conscience. But Matt sort of always lets his Catholic guilt get in the way of himself and his freedom. Meanwhile, in the kitchen, plays start being made, with Fisk's secret son Butch taking control as the new Kingpin to sell weapons, drugs, and information, with Mike Murdock acting as his second in command. What they both have in common is pretty much just spawning into existence as the sons no one remembers, but they have a really cool and fleshed out story in a Daredevil annual that shows them forming their friendships based around them never receiving the love they wish they had. It's really, really good and serves to explain why they seek to take over Hell's Kitchen quite efficiently. Unfortunately, Bullseye also breaks out of Rikers with multiple multiple clones to kill innocents for 8 days under the impression that God commanded him to do so. And Matt has to stop a weird viral drug that induces blind rage from spreading out into the city before it can wreak havoc upon New York called Reset. All of which ties itself up in a nice little bow with Matt's inevitable release from Rikers because Matt finally realized he's been wasting his time while the real and much larger threats outside continue to grow stronger. Those threats being the Hand and the Kingpin, who I'm sure you've noticed haven't been that involved with Daredevil for pretty much the entire run, except for the end. See, Fisk and Typhoid Mary had fallen in love soon after Daredevil's incarceration, and in that time of bonding and saving one another's lives and understanding each other, they found that they had more in common than they ever let each other see before. Thus, Fisk and Mary were to be husband and wife. Yet an hour before the reception, Matt couldn't help himself but visit Fisk and tell him that they've had this petty feud for years and it's never changed. But maybe by Matt letting Fisk get married, it'll give Fisk the happiness he's needed for his whole life to finally forget about their rivalry. Now, maybe Matt was right about what he said. Should he have kept that to himself? I kinda think so, because during Fisk and Mary's honeymoon, Fisk has the weirdest itch in the back of his mind that he can't seem to scratch, pulling out a file called Daredevil Identity. When opening the folder, Fisk finds everything completely blank. Knowing that Daredevil had something to do with making him forget who he was, Fisk will not stand for this act of erasure in his mind, officially enacting his law to eliminate all heroes in New York. Heroes all across New York are hunted down by any means necessary, like Luke Cage, the Spider-Man, the Fantastic Four. It's just everyone. Now you may be thinking that there's absolutely no way that the people of New York would just let this slide. Like, I get it that people hate mutants and would rather kill themselves than be saved by them. But Captain America, a villain? Really? Oh wait. Well, that's exactly why Fisk plays the media and public opinion, painting the heroes as vigilantes who cause more harm than actual good. He rides a wave of fear and political manipulation, even as he grows more unhinged behind closed doors. The reason he grows more unhinged comes down to the simple fact that he can't stand the thought that Daredevil somehow tampered with his mind, that he took away some scrap of power he's had in his possession for years. So now, seeking to regain control over his city and mind, Fisk captures the Purple Man and uses his power to get everything he desires. Fisk accidentally figures out that by influencing himself, he can remember who Daredevil is, and upon doing so, the Kingpin remembers everything. Now granted the target he'd forgotten for so long to deal out all of his rage, with nothing on his mind other than the imaginary feeling of crushing Matt Murdock below his feet, Fisk waltzes to Matt's apartment to find Mike Murdock still in Matt's place posing as him, and Fisk, thinking it's Matt, brutally murders Mike in Matt's apartment. The murder is caught on camera, and despite his previous protections as mayor, Fisk's empire crashes down before him. However, it doesn't get in the way of one last confrontation between Matt and Fisk, and featuring a genuinely horrifying moment, at least in my mind, where Matt uses the Purple Man's power against Fisk to face up to the vile things he's done his whole life, expecting Fisk to be crushed under the weight of all the evil he's dealt out, only for Fisk to brush it off like everything he's done is nothing. After which, Fisk is beaten and arrested for his crimes and brought before the Stromwinds, who promise to free him so long as he chooses to work under them as the President of the United States, only for Fisk to fucking tear them a new one and then ride off into the sunset with Typhoid Mary to face no actual consequences. However, he's left with the bitter knowledge that even in victory, he's lost everything. By the end, I found that this event felt like it was meant to tie up a good amount of loose ends that were left unresolved by the end of Zdarsky's first run, all before the last major loose end could be addressed in Zdarsky's second run involving the Hand, in which Matt decides to go underground with Elektra to rebuild the ancient order of the Fist, setting the stage for the final arc in Daredevil's life, focusing on mystical warfare and a much broader scale of justice for Daredevil to achieve. Or at least die trying. Alright, this is it. We made it to the end, and it's probably going to fly by faster than you think, so if you have trouble keeping up, just replay this portion 20 times to understand. So with the death of Mike Murdock, and because he was pretending to be Matt, everyone in the city believes that Matt Murdock has died. Matt uses this as an opportunity to leave his life behind and dedicate himself fully to Daredevil and the Fist. Yet before running off to the icy mountains to handle ninja shit with Elektra and Stick, who I found out just sorta comes back, yeah, dead for decades, and he's just back. Matt seeks to tie up a few loose ends and say his goodbyes to Foggy, Cole, Spidey, and finally Kirsten. Only in seeking to say his goodbyes to Kirsten, a dude by the name of Goldie appears as Matt just misses Kirsten taking the tea out of New York. Goldie speaks of being on the sidelines for too long, and that it's finally time he's made a push for Daredevil's story to reach its end. Now Goldie, to describe him briefly as a character, is like if I was plopped in a Daredevil story. Goldie, since the moment of meeting Matt, saw Matt's whole life laid out before him. Matt would only be able to accomplish it all so long as as Goldie molded the trajectory of Matt's life for decades. This includes the exposure of Matt's identity, his bout in prison, his fall at the hands of Typhoid Mary, the truck that sent him into a coma before he could stop Fisk's campaign. Matt's whole life as Daredevil has been orchestrated by Goldie so that he could be molded into the man that would one day save the world. Goldie confesses this, but also tells Matt that he's choosing to let more people die, so that it'll speed up Matt's life into becoming the King of the Fist. Now, this all gets delivered to Matt pretty much exactly how I've described, and this terrifies Matt, because no matter what Matt does now, he knows that it's all predetermined, and there is nothing he can do to stop his destiny. Shit's about to get real, especially since Matt has to build a sufficient army like he's fucking Big Boss reinforcing his mother base, by recruiting like Foggy, Cole, the Bullet, and hey, it's nice to see you still, man. I always love seeing you. This doesn't sit well with the Avengers because you can't just raid a prison like a Clash of Clans base and extract prisoners for your ninja army. But that can fall on the wayside for a sec because during this, Matt and Elektra get married under the not-so-working eyes of Stick, making the duo the official king and queen of the Fist. However, this isn't something that can be celebrated for long as the trajectory of their lives lands them face-to-face with the Hand and Frank Castle. It's a bloody massacre. The Fist is torn apart as Daredevil faces against Frank fighting over which one is actually right in what they're doing, as Frank believes he's avenging God by eliminating evil for the sake of his mission, believing that if God were alive, he would never let evil run rampant as much as it has. I feel that I should also address that Frank is not 100% there. He's not really in control of his actions due to the Hand's manipulations, which includes but not limited to the resurrection of Frank's dead wife who still wants a divorce. While Matt believes he's doing God's work by helping and nourishing those infected by evil to give them a second chance to be good. But long story short, nothing is settled by the end of the battle, as the Hand destroys the Fist's forces by taking down both King and Queen. The only thing that made this battle somewhat worth the trouble was Elektra managing to nab herself a talisman powerful enough to finally destroy the Hand and their ability to resurrect the dead. Only once they begin to destroy the talisman after licking their wounds, it turns out that Stick and Foggy have been spies for the Stromwinds the entire time, as they were only ever pale resurrections conjured up by the Hand. Now, if you're confused about how Foggy is one of these resurrections, Foggy actually died during the events of Devil's Reign. It's after this reveal, the Fist stronghold is then hit with a series of coordinated attacks involving the Reset drug by the Hand, on top of the Avengers also seeking to stop Matt's ninja army. This is a completely unexpected turn of events for Matt to escape from, that comes to an end with the Fist completely and utterly destroyed, leaving Matt and Cole pretty much the only survivors left. Reeling in depression, Cole quits the Force because he's tired of working for a system that never works. And in the frustration of this realization, Cole beats up Matt and shouts that he needs to get his shit together and save everyone who followed him from the Stromwinds' clutches, including his own wife. So what does Matt do? Matt shows up to the Stromwinds, declares undying loyalty to them so long as they free his wife, and upon the Stromwinds accepting, gouges out his own eyes and then terrorizes them until they free everyone else as well like a fucking crackhead. After which, Matt discovers through the mystical book of the Fist that his destiny ends once he sacrifices himself for God to enter hell and kill the beast that is the quintessential head of the Hand. If this is confusing, just know that this is the simplest way I could describe to you why everything that happens next happens. In Matt discovering a way into hell through a Japanese cave through ancient texts, Matt runs into his old partner Blindspot standing guard at said cave. Only Matt dismisses Blindspot from his post, telling him that his job is done and that it'd fill him with immense joy to know that Blindspot went home and found a happiness of his own. Now, with nothing left but his destiny laid before him to enter hell and kill the beast, Matt must kill himself, transporting his soul to the depths of hell with the most unlikeliest person to greet him there, Matt's own father. It's in venturing through hell that Matt witnesses those of whom he's lost in life left to suffer in hell like Karen Page, Mike Murdock, and Heather Glenn, until he figures out they're just machinations brought about by the beast, which empowers Matt with holy energy, granting him the ability to free trapped souls taken by the beast like Stick, Foggy, and Joe Biden, and ultimately the power to slay the beast. Only in reaching those held captive by the beast, it's revealed that everything Matt had believed he'd been fighting for was all wrong, thinking that God was behind the prophecy of the Fist, when all along it was just another demon's grand scheme to taint humanity. The weight of this tremendous misguidance weighs heavily upon Matt's conscience, yet it doesn't prevent him from rising to the occasion and freeing those that cannot save themselves, something he's done all his life and will continue to do until his dying breath. Because Matt Murdock doesn't fight for pain, death, and misery. Matt fights for joy, for life, and most importantly, love. This is what Matt was born to do, to snuff out the darkness. And in the end, Matt dies as he lived. A hero. After death, life moves on. Matt's loved ones look for Matt in everything, but when they look harder, they usually tend not to find him. However, it doesn't mean that Matt is dead, and this can apply to anyone else as well. If you're still looking for that someone, it means that the memory of them is still alive, which is why we go on. We go on for them. We make art because of them. We take on responsibilities for them. We continue to grow for them, and it's them that look upon everything we've built with endless joy. For Foggy and Cole, they continue to fight the good fight with the memory of Matt constantly in their minds. For Elektra, she fights the fight that no one can legally with the memory of Matt in mind, and whether they realize it or not, the people of Hell's Kitchen help their fellow man with the memory of Matt in mind as well. However, the story of Matt doesn't end in memory. Quite the contrary. Because why would Matt put an end to contradictions now? See, by the end of Zdarsky's run, everyone is beginning to move on, Elektra being one of them. Yet, walking through the streets of Hell's Kitchen, she spots a man with the face of her late husband. Walking into church to find this man, a priest, just wrapping up his sermon for the day. Surprised by the presence of an exotic woman with an incredibly familiar smell of jasmine, Elektra wastes no time. Elektra asks if he's happy, to which he says that happiness isn't sustainable, but content, that he is. He enjoys being the light for so many shrouded in darkness, happy knowing the man she loves can live the rest of his life in peace, unaware of the man he once was, the hard life that he endured, now given the gift of life and blissful ignorance, can go on fighting for a better world knowing that he's a part of it. Only that gift of life has other plans for Matt Murdock, because the door to his life as Daredevil may be closed. But who is to say it can't be left open just a few inches, since God's work is never finished? So why should it get to end for his own guardian devil? Matt Murdock is most commonly referred to be a walking contradiction. Matt fights for God while sporting a devil outfit and dishing out pain to others. Matt is blind yet can see more than most. He's a lawyer that believes in the system while he actively breaks the law by night as a vigilante. It's that very tension that makes him a compelling character. Matt seeks to save lives and at the same time seeks to punish himself in his mission. Daredevil is the very embodiment of light and dark, justice and vengeance, continuously walking on that tightrope every time he puts on the costume. Because Daredevil is a character that is about how saving the day can more often than not come at the cost of your soul. That saving the day can make you go insane, pull you into different directions, find you love, find you friendship, bring you heartbreak, sadness, lead you to question everything you've ever believed in, throw you with death, and ultimately make you utterly terrified of what the next day may bring you. But that's what makes Daredevil such an inspiring and endearing character in my eyes. Because despite the hundreds of hardships that are thrown Matt's way, despite losing everything 10 times over, despite abandoning his faith and driving out the ones he loves most, he risks everything day by day so no son ever has to hold the cold grips of their father's hands too soon, so that someone can always have a chance at redemption, so to never let the darkness win. Never. Matt Murdock is a character who has the insurmountable courage to dare evil and live life as a man without fear. Thank you for watching.
If my true love